Konnichiwa no minasama, anata wa genki desu ka? Osuki no biohazard no shoujo Sabrina desu. Junbei wa ii desu ka? Hey everyone, how's it going? It's your favorite Resident Evil girl, Sabrina here. And today we are going to be finishing, hopefully, I hope we finish it, as long as everything goes according to plan, Code Veronica, the book by S.D. Perry. We left it was a while ago since we read this, in like 2 weeks due to medical issues, but so it looks like the plane just crashed into the Antarctic base. That's where we're at right now. So yeah, it should be good. Yeah, we still got a little while till Chris shows up. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so we got some interesting parts. Yay, previously on Code Veronica. Oh, wait! Clear, we're gonna crash! like Revelations, like music that like plays like right before it cuts to like the game. That's funny. Also, hello Tom, how's it going? Welcome to stream. Pleasure to see you, as always. Definitely a little bit of a later start time today. But yeah, it's I hate it whenever for the people that use like ad blocking extensions on like YouTube and stuff, it's just hilarious to me when like it updates and then it'll like open a new tab saying like your ad block is up to date or whatever. Like it gives you some kind of like pop-up like window. It always catches me off guard when like when it happens because like it just takes away my stream. Anyway, Rev theme plays out the 3DS mic. That's diabolical. The 3DS mic is crazy. What? Yeah. Kind of funny. I guess my little rant for today is it's very interesting how people from your past that you've like, whether you've chosen to leave them behind, they've left you behind, you guys got disconnected, just all these different ways people like lose connection with each other. It's very interesting when it's the situation where you like where you stop talking to that person, like you cut them off, and then like many years later they come up and start talking to you again, and you just kind of like it just kind of throws you off guard because you're just like, I mean, yeah, it was like years ago, but like I stopped fucking with you for a reason. No, I shouldn't cuss, but I stopped messing with you for a reason, and it just blows me away that some of these people just ignore that after a couple years. It's just funny to me. That's my little tidbit from today. So I guess we're almost ready to get started. I'm gonna send out my links. Wait a second, see if anyone else joins, and then we will get started. Hey Ravel, how's it going? Welcome to stream. Pleasure to see you as always. I got another little rant thing that I just remembered. There's this one YouTuber that I don't like necessarily follow them, but I've watched a couple of their videos recently. So they're starting to pop up on like my feed. And And like it's funny because like at first they posted this video and it was just like YouTube is killing my channel. I just like skimmed through it a little bit and the person was just like complaining, saying like the YouTube algorithm is like the reason why their channel is like not doing so good anymore. You know, because it's not like it has anything to do with the content you're making. You know, it couldn't be that, of course not. And then after enough people called them out, they changed the title of it to, "Hey, I need your help." And it's just like, it's just hilarious to me to see them like backpedal like that. Like, quit and this is gonna be one of my lessons for today is don't stop blaming other people or things that you yourself are causing. If it's your fault, just own it. Just accept that you're the one causing issues and move on. Like, grow as a person. Like, that person must be a Derek. It's the only plausible explanation. Exactly. It's some real Derek behavior right there. It's just like, just take accountability for your actions, people. It's really not that hard. It's that easy to be a good person. Just take responsibility for your actions. Quit blaming other things or other people that have nothing to do with it. That is pathetic. That is some Derek behavior. So, if you messed up with something, just admit it, say sorry, and become a better person. Stop blaming things and holding yourself back. You should always want to grow as a person. That should be your #1 goal in life, is to become the best version of yourself that you could ever be. And if you're not actively doing that, you're not doing this right. So, there you guys go. Always strive to be a better person, no matter what. One of my former friends should hear this. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure everyone can find that person who needs to hear that, but you know, not my beautiful audience, of course. They're all very high intelligence, highbrow people that understand simple things like this. So I'm preaching to the choir here, but for those of you who aren't, there you go. I know his YouTube channel. There you go. But hello, Shiloh. How's it going? Welcome to stream. Pleasure to see you, as always. I never even finished sending out my links. I got distracted. It was that YouTube video I seen that just like clicked in my head. I had to talk about it. Sage Sabrina. That's right. Oh yeah, I missed those 2 comments earlier. You gotta drink to stay hydrated. No, I woke up late and everything has become a disaster today, and I'm just drinking a Monster and just gonna take the L, I guess. So, yeah, I didn't have time to like eat some honey and stuff. I didn't have time to practice. I didn't have any of that. Today has just been, honestly, the past 2 days have just been so awful. Nothing's going according to plan. Happy to be here. I'm Dandy, and I hope you and chat are equally great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sage Sabrina. My battery's dying. Well, she technically is a sage in chat, quite technically. I mean, I know my character knows Hashirama's version of Sage mode, so so by that logic, I am a Sage, right? So If only Hashirama was here to corroborate his story. It's actually been a while since I've seen him. I hope he's doing alright. I remember last time he was in chat, he was talking about he had like medical issues or something, so I should probably check on him, huh? Yeah, I can do that. If it's not too late to get water or prep some tea, we can wait. Yeah, I guess that's true. Probably should. Does caffeine water count? I have caffeine water. On standby, ready to go all times. Nah. I'm gonna toke some more and drink some chocolate milk. Oh, that sounds awesome, Shiloh. I hope you enjoy yourself. Not good enough. Alright. So what? I go downstairs, eat some honey, get some water. I wish I had the money for donuts. Such a, like, specific, like, thing you want. Normally people be like, I want some sweets or something. You specifically want donut. What kind of donuts, Shiloh? Do you want, like, powdered? Do you want, like, the, like, kind where it's, like, just, like, the donut with no top and no, like, stuff on it? Those ones are my favorite, personally. Say what you want, but the ones that have, like, no powder, no chocolate, no glaze, like, it's literally just the donut, like, just, like, the cake part of it. It's like, those are so good. Those are my favorite. But either glazed or chocolate. Okay. Do you have, like, a specific place in mind? Or, like, just, like, some Hostess donuts or something? Or, like, what are you thinking? You have some cool bakery, like, going to? There's actually a lot of, like, those types of places around here. I'm quite surprised by it whenever I actually go out and about. There's just, like, donut, cupcake type places, cookies, everywhere. And it's like, there's no way that many people are going to these places. Like, for them to open this many of them. But I guess so. That's right, coat those powerful vocal cords with some honey. Some honey. Some. The regular donuts with nothing added is an enjoyable classic. Yeah, see, you get it. It's just, they're especially good, like, in the morning. Like, if you need some kind of, like, quick thing to, like, put in your stomach before you get going. It's really nice not having all that sugar. So. Alright, I'll run downstairs real quick, grab some honey and some water, and then I'll be back, okay? With some coffee. See, exactly. Chef's kiss. I just missed my mouth with my monster. I don't know how you do that, but I just did it. Honestly, it was kind of funny because the lip of the can caught on my lip ring. It stopped, otherwise I would have probably accidentally poured it on myself or something. That would have been so awful, oh my gosh. See you soon. Yeah. I'm going to do it. You guys win. Alright, well, I went and ate a big gulp of honey and got some water. You guys happy now? Well, I'm off. Gotta charge my phone. Thanks for hanging out with us, Shiloh. I appreciate it. Okay. Alright, well, if you guys are ready, we'll get into it. That's right, I am back. Alright. Here we go. Chapter 10. Oh wait, let me... Oh, I almost forgot this time. You guys... Oh. There we go. Much better. Gets cozy, that's right. I'm ready. Hey, Dusttail, how's it going? Pleasure to see you again. That was supposed to be a heart, by the way. I'm holding the book in my hand. I hope you had a wonderful night and a wonderful day today. YouTube Vane, how's it going? Pleasure to see you as always. You are just in time. I am just about to start reading. Alright. Chapter 10. Claire's head hurt. Again. Something was on fire. She could smell smoke and she was incredibly cold. And she suddenly remembered what had happened. The snow, the building, the crash. Alfred. She opened her eyes and lifted her head, the action awkward and difficult because she was still strapped into her chair, now tilted forward about at a 45-degree angle. There was Steve in his chair, not moving. Steve! Steve, wake up! Steve groaned and mumbled something, and Claire breathed easier. After a few tries, she managed to get her belt off and slid into a crouch, her feet on what had been an instrument panel. She couldn't see much out of the windshield, and with the angle they were at, it appeared that they were inside some big building. There was gray metal siding some 50 or 60 feet in front of them. And through the gaping hole on her side of the plane, she could see a bit of the walkway with railing maybe 8 or 9 feet below. So where is everybody? Where is anybody? If it was an umbrella facility, why weren't there a dozen soldiers dragging them out of the wreckage? Or at least a few pissed-off janitors? Steve was coming around, though she could see a nasty bump at the edge of his hairline. She reached up and found that she had a matching bump just above her right temple, about an inch higher than the one she'd woken up with. Yesterday? The day before? My, how time flies when you keep getting knocked unconscious. What's burning? Steve asked, opening bleary eyes. I don't know, Claire said. There was just a trace of smoke in the cabin. She figured it was coming from some other part of the plane. In any case, she didn't want to stick around to see if something blew up. We should get out of here. Do you think you can walk? These boots were made for walking, Steve mumbled, and Claire grinned, helping him with his belt. They salvaged what they could from the weaponry that was piled at their feet, Steve's machine pistol and her 9mm. Unfortunately, they were low on ammo, and a couple of clips had gone missing. She had 27 rounds, he had 15. They split them up, and with nothing else to keep them aboard, Steve lowered himself out over the walkway, dropping at the last few feet. What's out there? Claire asked, sitting on the edge of the hole and tucking her gun in her belt. It was cold enough for her to see her breath, but she thought she could manage for a little while. Not a whole of a hell lot, Steve called back, looking around. We're in a big round building. I think it's built around a mine shaft or something. And there's a straight drop through the middle. There's nobody here. He looked up at her and raised his arms. Come on down. I gotcha. Claire doubted it. He was in good shape, but he had a runner's physique, not overly muscular. On the other hand, she couldn't stay in the plane all day, and she hated jumping off things higher than a few feet. She definitely wanted a helping hand. Coming down, she said, and pushed herself off the hole's edge, holding on as long as she could. And then she was dropping, and Steve emitted an oof sound, and they were both on the ground. Steve on his back with his arms around her, Claire on top of him. Nice catch, she said. Aw, it's worth nothing, Steve said, smiling. He was warm, and attractive, and sweet, and obviously interested. And for a few seconds, neither of them moved, Clara content to be held, and Steve wanting her. More, she could see it in the way he searched her face. For Christ's sake, you're not on vacation. Move. We should probably figure out where we are, Steve finished, and though she could see a flash of disappointment in his eyes, he did his best to hide it, sighing melodramatically as he dropped his arms in pretend surrender. Reluctantly, she got to her feet and helped him to his. It did seem to be a mine shaft, 60 feet across, give or take. The walkway they were running about halfway around, in steps. There were a couple of ladders, and she could see at least 2 doors from where they were, all down and to their left. But there was only 1 door on their level, to the right. Steve checked it, and it was locked. "So where do you think everybody is?" he asked, keeping his voice low. There was a definite echo effect probability, as massive and empty as the dark chamber was. Claire shook her head. "Making snow angels?" "Ha!" Steve said. "Should Alfred be jumping out right now with a flamethrower or something?" "Yeah, probably," Claire said. She'd been thinking that herself. Maybe he isn't here yet, or maybe he didn't expect us to crash, so he's in one of the other buildings where we were supposed to land. Which means we should book. If we can get one of those other planes before he finds us. "Let's do it," Steve said. "Do you want to split up? We should cover more ground that way. Hurry things along." "With Alfred running around somewhere, I vote no," Claire said, and Steve nodded, looking relieved. "So, that-a-way?" Claire said and started for the first ladder, Steve right behind. A short climb later, they were at the next door to try. Actually, double doors set in a little ways from the walkway, also locked. Steve offered to try and kick it in, but she suggested they should try others first. She was feeling more and more uneasy about how quiet things were, and didn't want the echoing thunder of a door being broken down to announce their presence. Though they'd have to be comatose not to have heard or felt the crash. On to the next. The only other door before an opening in the wall with a flight of stairs going down. Claire jiggled the handle and it turned easily. She and Steve readied their weapons just in case, and a nod from Steve, Claire pushed the door open, and felt her mouth drop open, totally shocked. What are the odds of that? It was a bunk room, dark and reeking, and at the sound of the door opening, 3-4 zombies turned and started for them, all of them freshly infected, most of their skin still attached. At least one of them was starting to go gangrenous, the noxious smell of hot, rotting heavy tissue in the cold air. Steve had gone pale, and as she slammed the door closed, he swallowed hard, looking and sounding kind of sick. "One of those guys worked at Rockford. He was a cook." Of course, she thought for a second that there'd been a spill here too, but it really was too giant of a coincidence. At least one of those planes outside had come from the island, probably a bunch of panicked employees, presumably not scientists, who hadn't realized they were carrying the infection with them. More sick and dying viral cannibals. And what else? Claire shuddered, trying to imagine the kind of soldier Umbrella would be trying to invent for an Arctic environment. And what natural animals might have been infected before their arrival. "We definitely gotta get out of here," Steve said. Well, maybe Alfred got eaten anyway, Claire thought. Wishful thinking, though they certainly deserved a lucky break. Let's go. The last place to check, a set of winding stairs, marked the end of the hallway, descending into a near-total darkness. Remembering the matches she found at Rockford, Claire handed Steve her gun and fished them out of her pack, giving him half before taking her weapon back. He took the lead, striking 2 of the matches about halfway down the stairs and holding them up. They didn't give off much light, but they were better than nothing. They reached the bottom and started to edge forward down a tight hall, Claire on high alert as the darkness closed around them. Something smelled bad, like rotting grain, though she couldn't hear anything moving. It didn't feel like they were alone. She was generally big on trusting her instincts, but it was so still and silent, not even a whisper of sound or movement. Nerves, she thought hopefully. They could only see about 3 feet in front of them, but they moved as quickly as possible, the feeling of being totally exposed and vulnerable pushing them forward. A few steps more and she could see that the corridor branched. They could keep going straight or turn left. "What do you think?" Claire whispered, and the hall suddenly exploded with movement, wings flapping, the rotten smell gusting over them. Steve cursed as the matches suddenly went out, completing the darkness. Something brushed past Claire's face, feathery and light and soundless, and she reflexively flailed at it in loathing, skin-crawling, not sure what to shoot. "Come on," Steve shouted, grabbing her upper arm and yanking her forward. He stumbled after him breathlessly, and again something fluttering touched her face, dry and dusty. And then Steve was pulling her through a doorway and slamming it closed behind them, both of them sagging against it, Claire shuddering, totally disgusted. "Moths," Steve said. Jesus, they were huge. Did you see them? Big as birds, like hawks."
She could hear him spit like he was trying to clear his mouth out. Claire didn't answer, fumbling for a match. The room was pitch dark, and she wanted to make sure there weren't any more of them flapping around. Moths, ew. They somehow seemed worse than any zombie, that he could brush right up against you, flutter up against your face. She shuddered again and struck her match. Steve had pulled them into an office, one apparently free of giant moths and any other umbrella unpleasantness. She saw a pair of candlesticks on the trunk to her right and immediately grabbed them up, lighting the half-burned tapers and handing one of them to Steve before looking around, the soft candlelight illumining their sanctuary in flickering shadows. Wood desk, shelves, couple framed paintings. The room was surprisingly nice, considering the utilitarian feel of the rest of the place. It wasn't as cold either. They quickly checked around for weapons or ammo, but they came up empty. Hey, maybe there's something in here we can use, Steve said, moving to the desk. There were a number of papers and what appeared to be a collection of maps strewn across its top, but Claire was suddenly more interested in the whitish lump stuck to the back of his right shoulder. Hold still, she said, stepping up behind him. There was some thick web-like gunk holding the thing on, and the lump was about 6 inches long and kind of misshapen, like a chicken egg that had been stretched out. What is it? Get it off, Steve said tensely, and Claire held the candle closer and saw that the white form wasn't entirely opaque. She could see inside, a little, to where a fat white grub was squirming around, encased in translucent jelly. It was an egg case. The moth had laid an egg case on him. Claire wanted to vomit, but held it together, looking around for something to grab it with. There was some crumpled paper in a wastebasket next to the trunk, and she snatched up a piece. Hang on a sec, she said, amazed at how casual she sounded as she pulled the case off his shoulder. It didn't want to come, the wet webbing tenaciously holding on, but she got it, instantly dropping it to the floor. It's off. Steve turned and crouched next to the paper, holding his candle out, and stood up abruptly, looking as sickened as she felt. He brought his boot down on it hard, and the clear jelly squirted from beneath the sole. Oh, man, he said, his mouth turned down. Remind me to blow chunks later after we've eaten, and next time we go through there, no matches. He checked her back clean, thank God, and then they split the papers up on the desk, Steve taking the maps and sitting on the floor, Claire looking through the rest of the desk. Inventory list, bill, list. Claire hoped Steve was having better luck, but from what she could gather, they were in what Umbrella was calling transport terminal, whatever that was. And it had been built around an abandoned mine. She wasn't clear on what had been mined exactly, but there were a number of receipts for some newer spending equipment and a shitload of construction materials. Almost enough to build a small city. She found a series of memos between the two extremely boring gentlemen, discussing Umbrella's budget allotments for the coming year. It was all more boring because everything appeared to be perfectly legal. The office they were in belonged to one of them, a Tomoko Oda, and it was from Oda that she finally ran across something that caught her eye, a postscript on one of his lengthy accounting reports dated from only a week before. P.S. By the way, remember the story you told me when I first got here about the monster prisoner? Don't laugh, but I finally heard of myself 2 nights ago in this very office. It was just as frightening as the stories say, a kind of angry, moaning scream that echoed in the lower levels. My foreman tells me that workers have been hearing it for something like 15 years, almost always late at night, and the most popular rumor has it that he screams like that because someone missed his feeding time. I've also heard that he's a ghost, a hoax, a scientific experiment gone wrong, even a demon. I haven't formed an opinion myself, but since none of us are allowed down there, I suppose I'll continue to be a mystery. I have to tell you, though, after hearing that horrible, insane howling, I have no interest in going below B2. Let me know about that stem bolt shipment. Regards, Tom. It seemed that the workers upstairs didn't know much about what was going on downstairs. Probably better for them, Claire thought, although considering the current situation, maybe not. Steve laughed suddenly, a short bark of victory, and stood up, grinning widely. He slapped an Antarctica political map across the desk. We're here, Steve said, pointing to a red spot that someone had penciled in. About halfway in between this Japanese outpost, Dome Fuji, and the pole itself, in the Australian territory. And right here is an Australian research station. We're looking at 10 or 15 miles tops. Claire felt her heart skip a beat. That's great. Hell, we could probably hike it if we find some good gear. And if we can get out of this basement, she thought, some of her enthusiasm dying down. Steve unfolded a second map, spreading it out. Wait, that's not the good part. Check this out. A photocopy of a blueprint. Claire studied the hand-drawn diagrams, side and top views of a tall building and its 3 floors, the levels and rooms neatly labeled. She stood up herself, too elated to stay still. It was a comprehensive map of the building they were in. Not tall, but deep. This is where we are at now, Steve said, pointing to a small square labeled manager's office on level B2. He traced his finger down and left and down again, stopping at an oddly shaped area at the bottom of the diagram, like a big quotation mark lying on its side. The tiny black letters read mining room, and there was a lightly penciled tunnel extending out of it with to the surface / unfinished, written on it, also in pencil. That's where we need to go. Oh, Claire said that. And that's where we need to go, Claire finished, shaking her head in disbelief. The map Steeda found would probably save them hours of wandering around, and with as little ammo as they had, it might also save their lives. Yeah, if we run in any locked doors, we break them down or shoot the locks, maybe, Steve said happily. It's like a 1-minute walk from here. We'll be flying in friendly skies in no time. It says the tunnel is unfinished, Claire started, but Steve cut her off. So, if they're still working on it, there'll be some kind of equipment laying around, Steve said happily. I mean, it says mining room, right? She couldn't argue with his logic and didn't want to. It was almost too good to be true, and she was more than ready for some good news. And though it did mean another run through Mothville, this time they'd be ready. You win the prize, Claire said, giving in her own enthusiasm. Steve raised his eyebrows innocently. Oh yeah? What's the prize? She was about to answer that, and she was open to suggestions when an unexpected and alarming noise stopped her, coming into an office from nowhere and everywhere. For a split second, she thought it was some kind of air raid siren. It was so loud and penetrating, but no siren started so deep and low, or kept rising like that, or conjured up such feelings of dread. There was fury in the sound, a blind rage so complete that it was incomprehensible. Frozen, they listened as the incredible grisly scream stretched out and finally died away. Claire wondering how long it had been since feeding time. She had no doubt that it was one of Umbrella's creations. No ghost could produce such a visceral sound, and no human soul could encompass such rage. Let's go now, Claire said quietly, and Steve nodded, his eyes wide and anxious as he folded the maps and tucked them away. He readied their weapons, laid out a quick plan, and on the count of 3, Steve shoved the door open. As the monstrosity's roar echoed away, Alfred smiled at it through the thick metal bars of its bare, dank cell, admiring his sister's handiwork. He'd helped, of course, but she was the genius who'd created the T-Veronica virus, and at only 10 years of age. And though she had considered her first experiment a failure, Alfred thought not. The result was deeply gratifying on a personal level. Things were so much clearer, had been since the very moment he'd left Rockford. Memories had returned, things he'd buried or lost, feelings he'd forgotten he had. After 15 years of gray area, of muddled confusion and unstable fantasy, Alfred felt that his world was finally drawing to order, and he understood now why their home had been attacked, and how fortunate for him that it had been. They knew it was time too, you see, Alfred said. If not for the strike, I might have continued to believe that she was with me. He watched with some amusement as the monstrosity tilted its filthy head towards the door, listening. It was chained to its chair, blindfolded, hands bound behind its back. And though it had been incapable of anything like real thought for a decade and a half, it still responded to the sound of words. Perhaps it even recognized his voice on some animal instinctual level. I should feed it, Alfred thought, not wanting to die before Alexia woke. But that would be very soon. Very soon. Perhaps the process had already begun. The thought filled him with wonder that he was to be present for her miraculous rebirth. I missed her so, Alfred said, sighing, so much that he created a reflection of her to share the lonely years of waiting. But she's soon to emerge a reigning queen, with me as a faithful soldier, and we'll be apart again. Which reminded him of his final task, a last objective to be met before he could comfortably begin the final wait. His joy at discovering the crashed plane had been short-lived when he found it empty, but upon refreshing himself with the terminal's layout, he realized the peasant couple could only be in 1 or 2 places. He'd taken a sniper rifle from the armory at one of the other buildings, a 30-06 bolt-action Remington with a magnifying scope, a delightful toy, and he was determined to try it out. He couldn't have Claire and her little friend showing up at some inopportune moment mangling the celebration. Suddenly, Alfred started to laugh, a gem of an idea occurring to him. The monstrosity had to eat. Why not bring it to 2 commoners? Claire Redfield had brought destruction down upon Rockford and had attempted to soil the Ashford name, just as the monstrosity had in a way. It will consume the enemy agents in observance and honor of Alexia's return, and then we'll have a private family reunion, just the 3 of us. At the sound of his laughter, the monstrosity became agitated, pulling at its chains with such force that Alfred stopped laughing. It let out another tremendous lingering roar, straining to be free, but Alfred thought the restraints would hold it a bit longer. "I'll be back soon," Alfred promised, hefting his rifle and walking away, wondering what Claire would think about meeting his and Alexia's father under such unusual circumstances, namely her own bloody death. The monstrosity was drawn to body heat and the smell of terror, Alfred liked to believe, very much looking forward to watching a helpless Claire stalk through the dark. As Alfred started up the stairs to the basement level, Alexander Ashford screamed again, as he'd done 15 years before when his own children drugged him and stolen his life. Yay! What a part to start off with, right? That's what I'm saying. That's why it was like such a good stopping point last time. Steve on point. Thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't get to practice, so I was really worried about the accuracy of the voices, so thank you. Alfred point of view is what I live for. It is nice. It is nice. I like doing Alfred's voice as well. It's really fun to do. Dropping in to say meow. Ooh. Hey dinosaur, how's it going? Welcome to stream. Pleasure to see you, as always. That water tastes kind of weird. Kind of like dirt. If that makes sense. Really weird. Anyway. Alright. Chapter 11. Oh yeah, hold on. One thing I wanted to say before we continue is that how down bad was Stephanie Perry to write some kind of like Claire would be up for suggestions on Steve's reward for finding the maps. Like, girl, what were you thinking? Ugh. That was crazy. I can't believe I read that. I was trying not to like just pause like in horror. There are only 3 main players left now: Claire, Steve, and Alfred. We don't know where Rodrigo is. But yeah, no, that was so out of pocket. Yeah, she's forcing a ship. Yeah, exactly. It was like, no, that is not how the game went. Don't say no stuff like that. Stephanie, don't let your own down badness get into your writing. Ain't nobody that down bad. She has a husband and kids, like, how? How is she that down bad? It doesn't make sense. It's like just like jerking him off his feet. like she got away with this stuff. That's crazy to me. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that before I continued. Sheesh. Exactly. You guys get it. Okay. Chapter 11. They pushed out into the dark, Steve ahead of Claire, leaving the office door open. Oh, that was a bad idea. There was just enough light to see where the hall branched right, which is all the light they needed. Right. Walk door on the right, walk steps to the left. It looped through his mind. The direction's simple, but he didn't want to make even a tiny mistake. The image of what Claire pulled off his back was still fresh in his mind, and they didn't know what else moths could do. 2 strides forward, and the first moth came at them, a whitish silent blur, and Steve opened up. Bam, bam, bam. 3 shots, and the flapping thing disintegrated. Soft plop sounds as the pieces hit the floor. And here came the rest, fluttering out from the corridor he and Claire wanted. They flew on a dusty wave of rot smell, shadowy flopping shapes. And what was that? The thick, hanging, man-sized thing webbed against the ceiling? Don't think about it now. Go now. Now, Steve said, and Claire ran out from behind him, darting to the right and down the hall as he opened fire again, 2 and 3 round bursts. Feathery pieces of wing and warm, repulsive goo rained down as he fired in the whirling dark shapes overhead, splashing him, making him gag. The moths dying as silently as they attacked. He felt one of them in his hair. Something felt warm and wet touch his scalp, frantically brushed at the top of his head, firing, knocking a sticky egg case away. Open! Claire shouted, much closer than he expected, and though he'd planned to back down the hall, firing as he went, the feel of that crap in his hair was the last straw. He ducked, covered his head with one arm, and sprinted. He saw her silhouette in a doorway on the right and plunged ahead, running directly into her outstretched arm. Claire grabbed a handful of his shirt and jerked him inside, slamming the door closed behind them, and then turned and started firing, blocking his body with hers. Hey, what's... Bam, bam! The room was huge, the shots echoing from faraway corners. There was a trace of light coming from somewhere, but Steve had heard them before he saw them. Zombies, moaning and gasping, 3 or 4 of them closing in on their possession. He could only make out their outlines, staggering and weaving forward. Saw 2 of them go down, but 2 more moving in to take their place. I'm okay, he called out between rounds, and Claire stepped aside, shouting for him to take the right flank. Steve targeted and fired, blinking and squinting against the dark, trying to get headshots. He took down 3 of them, then a 4th, so close that he felt blood splashing his hand. He immediately wiped it against his pants, praying he didn't have any open cuts, that he wouldn't run out of ammo, but there was another zombie, and another. And then Claire was pulling him again, and he stopped firing, let her lead him through the dark toward where the mining room was supposed to be. Behind them, zombies shuffled and wailed, giving slow motion chase. He tripped over a warm body and stepped on another, feeling something crunch underfoot. But as helpless and as afraid as he felt, it was nothing to suddenly hearing Claire cry out in pain, to feel her fingers leave his arm. Claire! Terrified, Steve reached out for her and felt only air. Watch your step, I stubbed my goddamn toe, Claire said irritably, no more than 2 feet away, and he felt his knees go weak. He could also feel a cold metal railing against his right shoulder, the steps to the mining room. They'd made it. Together they climbed the few steps, Claire still in front, and then when she opened the door, real light spilled out in shafts, piercing the blackness. Praise Jesus, Steve muttered, holding the door from behind as Claire stepped inside. And before he could follow, he heard that disturbed, girlish giggling that he'd come to know and hate. And Claire had slipped one hand behind her back and was motioning him to freeze. He let go of the door and she didn't move, letting it settle on her hip as Alfred said something. She slowly raised both her hands. It seemed Alfred had gotten the drop on Claire. But not on me, Steve thought, unaware that he was wearing a tight, grim smile. Alfred had a lot to answer for, but Steve was pretty certain that in another minute or 2, he wasn't going to be saying much of anything, ever again. He had her, just as he surmised. She had come to see about the tunnel, one exit from the terminal that didn't require a key. She wasn't a stupid girl by no means, but he was superior in intellect and strategy, among other things. Still standing in the doorway, Claire raised her hands, her expression annoyingly blank. Why wasn't she afraid? Drop your weapon, Alfred snapped, his finger on the rifle's trigger, his voice, naturally amplified by the mining pit that took up most of the floor, emanated throughout the icy chamber, sounding authoritative and a bit cruel. He liked the strong sound of it, and knew it was effective when she let the handgun drop from her fingers without hesitating. Kick it towards me, he commanded, and she did so, the weapon clattering across the concrete. He didn't pick it up, instead kicking it beneath the rail to his left. Both of them listening to her only hope bounce away over the frozen rocks, lost to the depths of the icy pit. How wonderful to exert such control. What happened to your traveling companion? He asked, sneering. Has he met with an accident? Oh, and I step away from the door if you don't mind, and keep your hands where I can see them. Claire edged forward, the door mostly closing behind her, and he saw a flash of some unhappy emotion across her face, knew immediately that he'd scored a point. Less of a hot meal for father, it seemed, but he doubted the monstrosity would complain. He's dead, she said simply. What happened to Alexia? Or am I speaking to Alexia? You know, you two look so much alike. Shut your mouth, little girl. Alfred snarled. "You don't deserve to say her name. You already know that it's time for her return. That's why your people attacked Rockford, to lure her out. Or were you hoping to kill her outright, to cut short her first breath?" Claire acted confused, determined to keep up her pretense, it seemed, but Alfred didn't want to hear any more of her lies. The game was losing interest for him. In the face of Alexia's imminent triumph, everything had paled by comparison. "I already know it all," he snapped, "so don't bother now if you'll come with me." Claire suddenly looked up and to the raised platform where the tunnel began. "Look out!" she shrieked, collapsing as Alfred spun around, seeing only the massive ice digger machine, the tunnel's dark entrance. And the door that had crashed open behind Claire, the boy diving in and landing on his side, pointing a weapon at him. At him! Furious, Alfred swung the rifle and pulled the trigger 3-4 times, but he hadn't had enough time to target properly, the explosive shots going wide, and it was as though a giant hand suddenly shoved Alfred backward, taking his breath away, the boy firing and then clicking on empty out of bullets. Alfred stumbled back another step and opened his mouth to laugh, ready to kill them both, and the rifle wasn't in his hands anymore. He dropped it for some reason, and his laugh was only a wet, painful cough. And something gave away behind his back, and then he was falling into the mining pit. He landed on a thick crust of ice and started to get up, but there was a great searing pain in his chest. Was it possible he'd been shot? With barely a sound, the ice gave way all around him, and he screamed, falling. He had to see her once more. He had to touch her, but he couldn't hear his father screaming. Two, coming for him, and then everything was lost in pain and dark. The sound of the terrible, monstrous howl that had risen up to meet Alfred's got them moving, Claire pausing just long enough to grab the Remington before climbing after Steve to the platform. With Steve on empty and her own gun kicked into the pit, it was their only weapon. They clambered to the cab of the huge yellow machine parked in front of the slanted rising tunnel, Steve taking the wheel, and again they heard that deep, insane scream. It was definitely closer, the monster prisoner loose somewhere inside. Steve flipped a bunch of switches, nodding and mumbling to himself as he went. Claire listened as she checked the rifle. Only 6 rounds. Gathering at the machine's digging device, an enormous screw-looking thing actually heated up to melt the ice. She didn't care what it did, as long as they got them out before the monster came looking for them. With the heavy machine humming to life, Steve explained that the tunnel was probably unfinished because the workers would have to go slowly and without using the heating element to avoid flooding half the facility. "But we don't," he said, grinning. "What do you say we make a lake?" "Go for it," she said, grinning back at him, wishing she felt a little more enthusiastic. God, they were getting out, and with Alfred Ashford finally dead, there was no one standing in their way. So why was she still so uncertain? It's that shit he was blabbering about his sister. Crazy, yeah, but it brought up one question she still didn't have an answer for. Why had Rockford been attacked? Steve jammed on the throttle and the machine lurched forward. They weren't seatbelts, so Claire put one hand on the roof, the digger bouncing almost as much as their plane had right before it crashed. Their view was mostly blocked by the giant twisting screw thing, but it was obvious when they hit the end of the tunnel, big time. The noise was incredible, deafening, like rocks in a blender times 100. There was a burning steam smell, and as they inched forward through the total blackness, she could hear the thaw even over the digging as torrents of water rushed past the cab. The grinding waterfall noises seemed to go on forever as they continued to climb, and then the machine shuddered, jerking, and the treads were straining, and sudden light flooded into the cab, gray and shadowy and beautiful. The digger crawled out of its brand new hole near a standing tower, Claire recognizing it as the helipad even as Steve pointed out the snowcats parked near the base. It was snowing, fat wet flakes spinning down from a slate sky, the humid cold seeping into the cab before they had been on the surface a minute. There was a wind blowing, the snow angled slightly, but not a big wind, but steady. "Copter or cat?" Steve asked lightly, but she could see that he was starting to shiver. So was she. "Your call, Flyboy," she said. A helicopter would be faster, but staying on the ground seemed safer. "Can we even take off in this?" "As long as it doesn't get any worse," he said, looking at him. He said, looking up at the tower, but he didn't seem sure. She was about to recommend one of the cats when he shrugged, pushing his door open and sliding out, calling back over his shoulder. "I say we hit the tower, Fly Girl," he said. "We can at least see if there's actually a choice." She got out too, craning her neck back. But she couldn't see the top of the tower either, and it was cold, frostbite cold. "Whatever, let's just hurry," Claire said, slinging the rifle over his shoulder. Steve jogged for the stairs, Claire following, freezing but exhilarated, suddenly totally high on being free to choose, to decide what they wanted to do, how they wanted to do it, and either way, they'd be at the Australian station in an hour or so, wrapped in blankets and drinking something hot and telling their story. Well, at least the more believable parts, she thought. Climbing the recently sanded stairs after him. Even the most open-minded people in the world wouldn't believe half of what they'd been through. Her happiness was wearing thin as they neared the top, 3 stories later, her teeth chattering it away. And when Steve turned around frowning, she no longer cared that about much of anything beyond getting warm. "There's no helicopter," he said, snow starting to stick to his hair. "I guess we'll..." He saw something behind her, and his face suddenly contorted with horror and surprise. He reached out to pull her up, but she was already moving. "Go!" she said, and turned up and bolted up the stairs, Claire barely half a step behind him. She didn't know what he'd seen. Yes, you do. But from the look on his face, she knew she didn't want it behind her. "It's the thing, the monster. It was loose and now it's coming for you." Her fear helpfully provided, and then Steve was grabbing her arm and jerking her up the last few steps. She stumbled into a giant empty square platform, the landing lines mostly obscured by fresh snow, and a gray haze of anomalous fog making it hard to see clearly. "Give me the rifle," he breathed, and she ignored him, turned to see if it was true, if she would recognize the awful pain of the thing that had screamed so horribly. And as it gained the platform, she saw that it was true. She recognized with no trouble at all. She unslung the rifle and backed away, motioning for Steve to stay behind her. Ooh. Alfred woke up in a world of pain. He could barely breathe, and there was blood on his face and his nose and mouth. And when he tried to move, the agony was instant and overwhelming. Every inch of him was broken, cut, smashed, or punctured. And he knew he was going to die. All that was left was his surrender to the dark. He was very afraid, but he ached so badly that perhaps sleep would be best. "Alexia." He couldn't give up, not when he'd been so close. Not when he was still so close. He forced his eyes to open it and saw through a thin red haze that he was on one of the lower level platforms that jutted into the mining pit. He'd fallen at least 3 levels, perhaps as many as 5. "Alexia," he whispered, and felt blood bubbling up from his chest, felt bones grinding as he shifted. Felt afraid of the pain he'd have to endure, but he would go to her because she was his heart, his great love, and he would be sustained by his name on her lips. "Give me the rifle," Steve said again, watching the thing take its first stumbling step in their direction, but Claire wasn't listening. She had her eye to the scope and was seeing what she saw under magnification, and what he saw was an abomination. Blindfolded, his hands tied behind its back, wearing only a shapeless and stained cut of leather knotted around its waist, the thing had suffered horribly, that much was clear, but he could see the raised scars, the ancient welts, the bloody shackle marks around its ankles. It looked almost human, but for its oversized body and strange flesh, gray and mottled, sitting over the lean muscles that had ruptured through in places, exposing raw tissue. Its torso was bare, and he could see a kind of pulsing redness in the center of its chest. A clear target, and for a few seconds Steve thought they were safe after all. "It doesn't have any weapons." There was a splintering cracking sound, and 4 asymmetrical appendages, like the joints of the legs of an insect, unfolded from its back and upper body. The longest easily 10 feet, curling from its right shoulder, like a scorpion's tail. It reeled forward another step, and some dark liquid was spraying from its body, from its chest or back. As the droplets stuck to the frozen cement, a thick purplish-green gas began to hiss upward from where they landed, blown by the snowy wind first one direction, then another. It mumbled out some heavy, wordless sound and then took another step toward them, the new arms whipping around its hairless head, making it weave from side to side. It could barely keep its balance, and as the thought occurred to him, Steve was already running. "Going low. Head down. Knock it off while it's still at the edge." "Steve!" Claire screamed fearfully, but he was almost there, close enough for the acrid tinge of its self-produced gas to sear his nostrils. "Has to be poison. Gotta keep it away from her." And just before he rammed into it, something viciously shoved him, slammed into his back and pushed, sending him flying to the ground. "Steve!" Claire screamed again, this time in absolute horror, because he was skidding across the icy cement on his side, and though he tried to stop himself, scrabbling at the frozen platform with frozen fingers, there was suddenly no platform left. Steve was only a few feet from the monster when a strange arm whipped down over them both, hitting Steve in the back and hurling him to the side. "Steve!" Steve skipped across the frozen platform like a flat stone on water and disappeared over the edge. Oh my god, no! Claire doubled over, the emotional pain hitting her like a physical blow, sharp and hard in her gut. He'd been trying to protect her, and it had cost him his life. For a second, she couldn't move or breathe, couldn't feel the cold, didn't care about the monster. But only for a second. She looked at the stumbling, tortured animal staggering towards her, knew without doubt the fury they'd heard came from long, hard years of abuse, of experimentation, and felt nothing. Her heart had sealed itself up, her mind suddenly colder than her body, and straightened jacking around into the chamber of the rifle, appraising the situation with a clear eye. Obviously, she could outrun it, leaving it on the platform and be a mile away before it found its way back down. But that wasn't an option, not anymore. Its death would be a mercy, but that didn't figure into her calculations either. It killed Steve, and now I'm going to kill it, she thought coolly, and walked past the northwest corner of the platform to the farthest from the stairs. Its appendages flailing overhead, the monster would wove around in a painfully slow half-circle, its blind face finally turned in her direction. It let out another deep, gasping, mindless sound, and its body vomited out more of that smoking liquid, some kind of acid or poison, probably. She wondered who had created such a thing, and how this was no T-virus zombie, and from its abused and tormented state, it wasn't a BOW either. She supposed she'd never know. Claire raised the rifle and looked through the scope, focusing on the pulsating tissue in the center of its chest, and then raising to target its blank gray face. She didn't know about the tissue mass at its heart, but she wasn't sure it'd survive a headshot by 30-06. She didn't want to waste time stalking it or inflicting unnecessary pain. She just wanted it dead. She aimed at the center of its forehead and had a strong jaw and fine, straight nose beneath the puckered flesh, as though it had once been handsome, even aristocratic. Maybe it's another Ashford, she thought mockingly, and fired. The monster's head split apart, almost seemed to shatter as the round found its mark. Shards of bone and brain matter flew, all of it as gray as the gray sky, steam rising up from the broken bowl of its skull as it fell. First to its knees, the mutant arms spasming in the snowy air, then onto its ruined face. Claire felt nothing, no pleasure, no dismay, not even pity. It was dead, that was all, and it was time for her to go. She didn't feel the cold, but her body was shaking violently, her teeth rattling, and she knew she had to get warm. Claire? The voice was weak and shuddering, and unmistakably Steve's, coming from the platform's east edge. Claire stared at the empty space for a split second, entirely dumbfounded, and then ran, dropping to her hands and knees beneath the soft platter of snow, leaning out to see him awkwardly wrapped around a support post, clinging to the frozen metal with both arms and one leg. His face was almost blue with cold, but when he saw her, his eyes lit up, a look of incredible relief crossing his pale features. "You're alive," he said. "That's my line," she answered, dropping the rifle and bracing herself against the edge, leaning down to grab his arm. It was a struggle, but in another moment, Steve was back on the platform, and they were on their knees, embracing, too cold to do anything but hang on. "I'm so sorry, Claire," he said miserably, his face buried in her shoulder. "I couldn't stop it." Her heart had unsealed when she'd seen him alive, and now tightened painfully. It was all of 17 years old, and his whole life ripped apart by Umbrella, and he'd just nearly died trying to save her life again. And he was sorry? "Don't worry, I got it this time," she said, determined not to cry. "You get the next one, okay?" Steve nodded, sitting back on his heels to look at her. "I will," he said so vehemently that she had to smile. "Cool," she said, and crawled to her feet, reaching down to help him up. "That'll save me some work. Now let's go catch a cat, yeah?" Supporting each other and staying close for warmth, they made their way to the stairs, neither of them willing to let go. Alright. Well, that was that chapter. I don't know what her... I hate just constantly bringing this stuff up, but I don't know what... I've never heard anyone say they jacked around another rifle. Hold on, I'm just gonna jack around real quick. What was that? What? I have never in my life heard that said. Whether it be, in a video game, in real life, from people in the military, I have never heard anyone could call it jacking around before. So, S.D. Perry, yeah, you need to explain yourself here. What's going on, girl? You letting your personal feelings get into the writing or something? I'm sitting here reading this book, and at some points I think it might be one of those like fanfics you'd see on like Tumblr or something. Jeez, I love this book, but I forgot how weird she words some of this stuff. Just a smiley face, that's hilarious. Oh man. Claire jacked around in her rifle. It's just crazy. It was like, what? And it's like, oh yeah, and then when she like grabbed him and pulled him like off a platform, it was just like, she's like, she jerked Steve. And it's like, well, why would you say it like that? Why can't you just say she grabbed him? Like, what? Why are you saying it like that? Girl, like... That was crazy. Yeah. Maybe she lost a bet. That's what it's... See, that could be very likely. She could have lost a bet. No, I went to go grab the book and I accidentally bent the page. But, yeah, maybe she lost a bet and she had to just incorporate these words into her, like, story for some reason. So. Alright, Stephanie, I'm on to you. What was the D standing for again? Where's it at? No, I don't see it. Usually in her book, she has like a little segment like about herself. And it says what her name is. I don't know. But whatever. The D stands for something. Probably not what she wants it to stand for. But... Oh, Danielle. Stephanie Danielle Perry. Yeah, I found it. D stands for down bad. Stephanie Down Bad Perry writes multimedia novelizations in the fantasy science horror realm for love and money. For love and money. That's crazy. Usually you'll see people try to be like humble on those pages and they're like, I just write because I really love writing. Or I want to give people a story that they can love. And she's just like, nah, I'm doing it for money and love. I'm doing it for the love of the game. Like, girl, what? No wonder she's so down bad. She's got that hungry personality, you know what I mean? That's crazy, what? Stephanie Down Bad Perry. Jesus. Oh, yeah, that was funny. Alright, so now we'll go on to the next chat. I don't know. I don't like that my water tastes like dirt for some reason. It's kind of repulsive. And it's like, I didn't do anything different. Like, I just got it from the fridge like I always do. So, like... At that point, I'm just like, should I not reuse this bottle again? Should I just throw it away and then grab a cup of water? Or like, do I need to change my water filter again or something? Because I just changed it pretty recently. So yeah, it's weird. It does not taste right though, that's for sure. It kind of smells too. It's not sparkling water or something, is it? No, it's not. It's just regular water. That tastes like dirt for some reason. Yeah, plastic bottles are supposed to be reused over long periods of time. Oh, aren't. Oh, okay, well, that's probably it then. Because, like, what I'll do is I'll, see, like, on the weekend or something, I'll go to the gas station and I'll pick up, like, a bottle of water while I'm there. And then I'll drink it, and then when I'm done, I'll just keep refilling it from the fridge. And then, like, normally I put it on my nightstand next to my bed. So in the middle of the night, if I want some water, I can just drink some water. But yeah, if that's the case, then, yeah, this might not be a good idea. Oh well. I think I had this for, like, a week. I'm pretty sure I got it when I went to the hospital. So. They usually say not to be refilled on them, but it's legit for a few refills, to be honest. Dang. I didn't know that. Well. Oh well. But yeah, so I don't want to drink this, to be fair. Dang, a week isn't even that long, really. Yeah, because I got it. It's like what? I went to the hospital like Wednesday. Oh wait, was that 2 weeks ago? Wait, was that 2 weeks ago? It might have been 2 weeks. I forgot already. What day even is today? September 10th. No, I'm curious. I gotta check this. It was like the 27th. So yeah, it was like at least 2 weeks ago or something like that, right? It feels like a while. Look at the calendar. Yeah, that was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago today. So yeah, this is a 2-week-old bottle of water that I've been refilling. So is 2 weeks a long time? Or is that still not a long time? I guess for this bottle, it's a long time. So yeah. With that being said, I say we go on to chapter 12. Drinking water in a glass is healthier. Chemicals can leach in a plastic bottle, affecting taste. Oh, it's healthier, huh? So if it's healthier, that means I have to drink less of it, right? I'm just joking, but... Alright, you guys got me worried. Maybe I'll go pour this out and throw the bottle away and get the glass of water. So, I guess I'll be right back, okay?
I went to go take a drink of water to show that, like, I got it. I'm like, yeah, I got the water, guys. And then it went down the wrong pipe. Oh, alright. Anyway, all that aside. Alright. I'm just saying a fact, I don't mean to cause alarm. Well, I appreciate you saying it anyway. That definitely, I think is a healthier alternative to drinking it out of the bottle that tastes like dirt for some reason. So I would say it's the right call. I love how on the back of the book it says intended for mature readers. Like, yeah, I bet Stephanie, with the way you're talking, I bet you need to be mature to read these books. It actually reminds me, like, I can't believe that, like, those books exist where it's like, and like, I've seen plenty of them when I worked in Walmart, because I worked in the electronics section, which also takes care of books. They do books and electronics, like, the same employees share that section. And, I remember, like, even at Walmart, they were selling the craziest books. Like, it'd be like, sexy cowboy husband, like, makes me cheat on my husband or something. And it's like, yo, like, what is going Y'all just sell this stuff at Walmart. It's crazy to me. Like, what? Some of them, like them books are so unregulated. I swear, like they'll let people print and publish anything at Walmart. Like I have never seen such down badness in a book before until I see those books at Walmart. And I'll tell you guys this: if you're at like the store one day and you just like, and you're bored, you want something interesting to do, go to the book section and look for the ones where it has like the little books that are kind of like this size, like not like regular size, but like the smaller ones that are paperback. And I can almost guarantee you, depending on like what store you're at, you'll see some of these things I'm talking about, and it's just like, it is ridiculous. It's hilarious. That's all I gotta say. Just trust me on this. Like, you guys will get a good laugh out of it if you're ever there and you want to check out what I'm talking about. Some of the titles get crazy too. Like it'll be like there was one where it was like my new man sleeps with a bunch of roaches next to his bed, but my old man don't know, or something crazy. I'm just like, what? Why would you like make that the title of your book? Like, first off, that's like a really long title. Like it'll take up like half of the front cover will be just like the title. Usually, honestly, they're down here, and then it shows like people like on the front. Like it'll show like a girl and a guy, assuming like it's whoever the story's about, and then like it'll just have the crazy title like down here. And they'll write certain words in like fancier fonts or fancier colors. And it'll be like my new man, and it'll be like in red cursive or something. And it'll be like roaches, and it'll just be like pure like white like it's crazy. Yeah, you'll see. Oh, what, on the zombie you're talking about? Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, you guys reminded me of that and I had to talk about it. It's hilarious. You'll see. Alright. Chapter 12. Alexia Ashford watched her twin die at her feet,
bleeding and in great pain, reaching out to touch the stasis tank with adoration in his dying eyes. He'd never been particularly bright or competent, but she had loved him very much. His death was a great sadness, but also the sign she'd been waiting for. It was time to come out. She known for some months that the end would be soon, or rather the beginning, the emergence of a new life on Earth. Her stasis had remained stable for most of the 15 years she needed, her mind and body unaware of life, unaware that she was suspended in freezing amniotic fluid, her cells slowly changing and adapting to T. Veronica. In the past year, however, that had changed. She had hypothesized that given enough time, T. Veronica would raise consciousness to new levels, expanding areas of the mind that would surpass simplistic human senses, and she had been correct. For the last 10 months, she had begun experiencing herself in spite of stasis, testing her awareness, and she had been able to see through her human eyes when she wished. Alexia reached out with her mind and turned off the support machines. The tank began to drain, and she stared out at her dear brother, most unhappy that he had died. She could choose not to employ her emotions, but she had been human with him. It seemed appropriate. When the tank was empty, Alexia opened it, stepping out into her new world. There was power everywhere, hers for the taking, but now she sat down in front of the tank and laid Alfred's body, head in her lap, experiencing the sadness. She'd begun to sing a child song that her brother had liked, stroking his hair back from his drawn face. There was sadness in the lines around his eyes and mouth, and she'd wondered what his life had been like. She'd wondered if he'd stayed at Rockford, stayed at Veronica's home, the home of their ancestors. Still singing, Alexia reached out to her father, and was surprised to find him missing, either dead or beyond her range of perception. She had touched his mind only recently, studying what was left of it. In a way, he was responsible for what she had become. The T. Veronica had turned his mind into sludge, had driven him insane, as it would have to her if she hadn't tested it on him first. She stretched her awareness, finding sickness and death in the upper levels of the terminal. A pity. She had been looking forward to beginning her experience again immediately. Without test subjects, she had no reason to stay. She found 2 people not far from the Umbrella facility and decided to flex her control over substance to see how much effort it took, and found that it was hardly an effort at all. She concentrated for just a few seconds and saw a male and female inside of a snow machine, and wished for them to be brought back to the facility. Instantly, lines of organic matter tore through the ice, ripping towards the vehicle. Amused, Alexia watched with her senses as the giant tentacle formed new substance rose up and curled around the machine, lifting it effortlessly into the air, and then it threw it back at the facility. The machine tumbled end over end, its engine bursting into flame, and came to rest against one of the Umbrella buildings. Both were still alive, she thought, and well pleased. She could use one of them in an experiment she'd been thinking about for weeks, and would surely find a good use for the other in due time. Alexia continued to sing to her dead brother, intrigued by the changes she could see coming, looking forward to gaining a fuller mastery of her new powers. She stroked his hair, dreaming. Oh, that was a short chapter. Well, very interesting, indeed. It's like really crazy how they're like explaining her like powers and stuff like that. How she just had, like, honestly, it honestly reminds me of sensory ninja in Naruto, where they could just they just can just sense like people's chakra and life presence over like a certain range. That's what it feels like. She just gained the ability to mold chakra. She thinks she Kaguya for real. Alright. Dang quick chapter for real. Yeah, right? Things fell to shit pretty fast when he finally reached the island. Chris stood on top of the cliff. Yeah, it's a Chris chapter now! We got Chris! Yay! Chris stood at top of the cliff in the early night, catching his breath, soundly cursing himself. Everything had been in that bag. Weapons and ammo, repelling equipment so they can get back down to the boat, flashlight, a basic first aid kit, everything. Not everything. You've still got 3 grenades on your belt, his mind told him brightly. Terrific. Halfway up the cliff, he loses his grip and drops the bag into the deep blue sea, but it appeared he still had his sense of humor. Yeah, that'll go a long way towards saving Claire's life. Barry was right. I should have brought backup. Well, he could stand around all goddamn day wishing things were different, or he could get moving. He picked moving. Chris hunched over and stepped into the low cave entrance he'd seen at the start. An isolated area, but definitely connected to the rest of the compound. There was a radio antenna on the ledge outside, and when he straightened up a few steps later, he was inside a large open room, the walls and ceiling organic, but the floor carefully leveled. There was a light somewhere ahead, and Chris started for it, keeping his fingers crossed that he wasn't about to walk into an umbrella military dinner. He doubted it. From what he'd seen of the island, the attack Claire had mentioned had been excessively brutal. He was less than a dozen steps into the shadowy chamber when a small tremor shook the cave, spilling rock dust and pebbles over his head, enclosing the cave entrance he'd just walked through. Collapsing rock having a fairly distinctive sound. It seemed the island attack had made things a bit unstable. Oh, wonderful, he muttered, but was suddenly a bit happier about the grenades. Not that they would help much here. Even if they could blow the mouth without bringing it all down, it was still too high to jump, and the rope had been in the bag. Unless she'd been taking lessons, Claire wasn't a good enough rock climber to go down unassisted. What? Someone rasped, and Chris dropped into a defensive crouch, searching the shadows, and saw a man on the cave floor, slumped against the wall. He wore a tattered white t-shirt with blood on it, his pants and boots military. He was one of Umbrella's, and not in very good shape. Nevertheless, Chris stepped quickly to his side, ready to kick the shit out of him if he so much as sneezed. I didn't know anyone was still around, the man said weakly, and coughed a little. Thought I was the last one, after the self-destruct. He crouched down, trying to keep his voice level. I'm here looking for a girl. Her name is Claire Redfield. Do you know where she is? At the sound of Claire's name, the man smiled, though not at Chris. An angel. She's gone. Escaped. I helped her. Let her go. She tried to save me, but it was too late. Hope bloomed anew. Are you sure she got away? The dying man nodded. Heard the planes leave. Saw a jet come out of the basement under the tank. You should go too. Nothing left here. Chris could feel some of his stress and fear ebbing away, tensions in his neck and back releasing. If she was gone, she was safe. Thank you for helping her, he said sincerely. What's your name? Ravel. Rodrigo Ravel. I'm Claire's brother, Chris, he said. Let me help you, Rodrigo. It's the least I can do, and... A deafening animal cry filled the cave, and at the same instant, another tremor struck. A bad one. The ground shaking so hard that Chris was thrown off his feet. And earth erupted, and what Chris thought was an explosion at first, a fountain of dirt and rocks spraying upward. But it kept rising, and Chris could see thick, filth-coated slime beneath it. It could smell sulfur and decay, and saw a huge cylinder made of rubber still climbing. And then it shrieked again, the top of the cylinder twisting around, wormy tentacles peeling back from a yawning, howling throat, and Chris scrambled to his feet, grabbing a grenade from his belt. And the giant shrieking snake worm came crashing down, mouth open, and swallowed Rodrigo whole before slamming into the sandy soil where he'd been sitting. It dove into the ground like a swimmer into water, its impossibly long body arching over, following through. Jesus! Chris stumbled away as the ground continued to quake, the burrowing creature kicking up rock and dirt and sand all around him. And he realized that he had to kill it or get away fast, and it could easily become up beneath him for another quick snack. He ran to the outer wall of the cave, making a split-second plan as the snakeworm burst up through the ground behind him, its insane mouth peeling open as it hesitated at the top of its arch, ready to plunge down over him, rocks falling all around. And Chris pulled the safety pin off the grenade, stripping the tape and pin away, and ran, straight for the creature's lower body where it emerged from the ground. Crazy, this is crazy! He ducked just before hitting the filthy, muscular body and set the grenade on the ground in front of it. On the run, as careful as he could not to set it off, and then dived for cover behind the snakeworm's twisting body, tucking into a shoulder roll, covering his head as the animal started downward, shrieking. And boom! The explosion shook the ground even harder than the animal had. The streak cut off, the grenade blast muffled by half a ton of worm guts that shot out in all directions, stinking and warm, painting the walls of the cave in a viscous bucket loads. Chris rolled on his back, drenched. Watched the front half of the animal convulse and writhe, already dead, and as its muscles and reflexes clenched and released for the last time, the snakeworm expelled a gush of stomach acid and rock from its gaping maw, vomiting out its last meal. Rodrigo! Before the massive corpse had completely settled to the ground, Chris was at Rodrigo's side, horrified and helpless, the man seizing in shock and pain. He was coated in yellow bile, and Chris could see places where it had already burned through his skin.
Rodrigo let out a soft cry, too weak to scream in what had been incredible pain. Chris tore his own jacket off, wiping his face clean of sticky acidic fluid. "You're gonna be okay, just relax. Don't try to talk," Chris said, fully aware that Rodrigo would be dead in minutes, perhaps seconds. He kept talking, kept his tone soothing in spite of his own dismay. Rodrigo opened his eyes, and though they were full of suffering, they also had the wet, glassy, faraway look of someone leaving it all behind, someone about to be free of pain and fear. "Right pocket," Rodrigo whispered. "The angel gave for luck." Rodrigo took a slow, deep breath and let it out just as slowly, an exhalation that seemed to go on forever, and then he was gone. Chris automatically closed his half-open eyes, simultaneously sad and relieved at Rodrigo's passing. The end of a life, but also an end to dying. Chris automatically closed his... Oh wait, I already read that. Rest, friend. Sighing, Chris reached into Rodrigo's pocket, filled a skimmed warm metal, and pulled out the scuffed, heavy old lighter that he'd given to Claire himself, a long time ago, for luck. Chris held it to his chest, suddenly overwhelmed by a rush of love for his sister. She'd carried the lighter with her everywhere for years, but had given it up to ease the mind of a dying man, possibly one of the men responsible for her capture. He slipped it back into his pocket and stood, glad he'd been able to give it back to her, and to tell her that she'd made a difference in Rodrigo's last hours, that he'd smiled upon hearing her name. Even though Claire didn't need to be rescued, Chris's trip to the island had already turned out to be worthwhile. The stink of the splattered cave was getting to him, and now that he knew his sister was safe, all that was left was to get himself home. His entrance had been caved in, and he didn't have a decent weapon, but if someone had triggered Umbrella's self-destruct system, it seemed that all their illegal facilities were built with such fail-safes in place. A fine way to destroy evidence, if anything went wrong. Then he shouldn't run into too much trouble looking for the tank that Rodrigo had mentioned. See if there was another jet to be had. No going back, he said softly, and with a final silent prayer for Rodrigo to find peace, he went to see what he could find. Yeah, see, now we're getting to the meat of this book, is what I'm talking about. There was a fight about to happen on one of the monitors in what was left of the control room, and Albert Wesker, frustrated by a day of fruitless searching and not looking forward to yet another long flight, pulled up a crate and sat down to watch. He'd already sent the boys back to the world. He was alone, except it appeared that he'd missed somebody, and somebody was still wandering around the island. But not for much longer, he thought happily, wishing the reception was better. Thanks to that lonesome loser, Alfred Ashford, the self-destruct system had screwed everything up, and finally something interesting was going to happen. Christ, he's unarmed! Crazy or stupid or totally ignorant of what the island was, no question. Wesker grinned. The unarmed man was walking through the training facility just one floor below, and he was about to meet up with one of Umbrella's newer bioorganics, one that had been trapped down in the sewers until Wesker had shown up and set it free. They were one hallway apart. When the dumbass turned the next corner, he was dead. Wesker adjusted his sunglasses, pleasantly diverted from his own troubles. Sweepers, Umbrella was calling the new monsters, but they were basically hunters with poison claws. Huge, primarily amphibious, violent as hell. In Wesker's opinion, the hunters, the 121 series, were perfectly badass without the extra poison touch. But isn't that just like Umbrella? Always wasting resources, playing games when they could be winning wars. Yes, it was, but there was about to be bloodshed. Wesker set aside his distaste for the company and leaned in to watch. The weaponless idiot, a tall guy with reddish-brown hair, that was about all the static would allow, was 2 steps from disaster, the sweeper waiting just around the corner, when he stopped and backed up a step, pressing himself against the damaged wall. Wesker frowned. The man started to back up, slowly and carefully, still hugging the wall. Okay, maybe not a complete idiot. He made it halfway back down the corridor he'd come through when the sweeper finally got impatient, deciding to take action. There was now no sound system left, but the creature had thrown back its head and was screaming, that weird, trilling screech that floating up to Wesker through the ruined building just a split second later. Get him! Wesker breathed eagerly, looking back at the poor, doomed dumbass, just in time to see him throwing something small and dark, the sweeper leaping out from behind the corner, still screaming, the object landing at its feet. And the building was shaking, the screens going white and then black, the deep thunder of explosives rumbling through the floor. Wesker was astounded and then furious. That creature had been a miracle of science, a warrior created for battle. Who is this dick who just rambled in and blown it to shit? A dead dick, Wesker thought darkly, pushing the crate away and heading for the stairs. He took them two at a time, carefully bypassing a few still burning fires, aware that he was channeling all his frustrations and upsets towards the unknown soldier, and not particularly caring. Alexia wasn't at Rockford, which meant he had to get his ass to the Antarctic of all places, to the only other facility she might be at. Why else would Alfred have gone there? If Wesker didn't want to get her before she woke up, he might have to go home empty-handed, all of which added up to failure. And if there was one thing Wesker hated, it was losing. He marched through the crumbling leftovers of the training facility, reaching the hall he wanted, silencing his steps as he edged further along. There was still smoke in the air when he reached the corner where the conflict had taken place, but little left of the sweeper. Most of it was stuck to the walls and ceiling. There, ahead and to the left, he could smell the intruder. He could smell sweat and anxiety emanating from the small working lab to which he'd retreated. This is going to hurt you more than it hurts me, he thought, his mood lifting somewhat at the thought of a little personal interaction. Not wanting to get blown up, Wesker didn't hesitate. Didn't give the guy a chance to get paranoid. He strode into the room and saw the soon-to-be corpse standing with his back turned and moved. Moved the way only he could move. 1 second. He was walking through the door. The next, he was spinning the intruder around, lifting him by his throat, and then looking into the startled face of Chris Redfield. Oh my. Chris, who had been on the Raccoon Stars, who'd been led under Wesker's command to the Spencer estate, where he proceeded to thoroughly screw up Wesker's plans. Chris Redfield had cost him money, and had almost cost him his life. But worst of all, he had been primarily responsible for the biggest failure in Wesker's career. Wesker recovered himself quickly, a dark, wonderful joy spreading through his entire body. Chris Redfield, as I live and breathe. What brings you to Rockfoot, if you don't mind me? Wesker trailed off, still gazing up into Redfield's increasingly red face as he uselessly pried at Wesker's fingers. The girl, of course. He hadn't even known that Chris had a sister, but the deranged letter that Alfred Ashford had so thoughtfully left behind explained everything, including his plans for the young Claire Redfield. She's not here, Wesker said, grinning. With his free hand, he straightened his sunglasses. You're dead. Chris gasped, and Wesker grinned wider, not bothering to respond to such a statement. Oh wait, was that Chris who said that? You're dead, Chris gasped, and Wesker grinned wider, not bothering to respond to such a stupid statement. Don't change the subject, Chris. Don't you want to know what Claire is, Did you know that her plane took a little unplanned detour to the Antarctic? Chris was slowly choking to death, but Wesker could see that the news of his sister was hitting him harder than his own imminent demise. Wonderful. There are experiments being performed there, Wesker mock whispered, as if telling him a secret. I plan on going myself, see if I can get an experiment or two of my own going. Tell me, is your sister good looking? Do you think she might be interested in getting some action? Because I've got a hot-on like you wouldn't believe. Chris flailed at Wesker, the helpless fury in his eyes absolutely gorgeous. He hit Wesker in the face, knocking his sunglasses to the ground, and Wesker laughed, blinking up at him, slowly letting him see. He still wasn't used to it himself, the gold-red cat's eyes occasionally surprising him when he looked in a mirror, and they had exactly the effect he'd hoped for. What are you? Chris rasped out. I'm better, that's what, Wesker said. New employers, after the Spencer estate, I need a little help getting back on my feet, which they were perfectly willing to provide. You think Claire will like it? Monster, Chris spat. I'll show you monster, you shit. Wesker started to close his hands slowly, watching Chris's eyes bulging, a vein in his forehead popping out. And that was stopped by the sound of laughter. Cool female laughter filling the room surrounding them. Don't you? Oh wait, that's Alexia talking. I can't even remember what her voice sounds like. Don't you want to play with me? A voice said. The same woman, low, sexy, and dangerous. And then she began to laugh again, an unmerciful, beautiful sound that finally trailed away to nothing. Alexia! God, she was awake. And that kind of power it would take for her to look in on him here, to project herself so far. Wesker threw Chris to one side, barely hearing the plaster wall crack beneath his useless skull, his thoughts full of Alexia. He had to go to her immediately. He had to have her, and not just for the sample, though he'd take what he could get. I'm coming, he said, scooping up his sunglasses and then moving, speeding through the broken facility to where his private plane waited. Chris Redfield was his past. Alexia Ashford meant his future. Chris crawled to his feet soon after Wesker left, aching in about a dozen places, his throat horribly sore. He didn't know what had happened exactly. Didn't know who the woman was or why Wesker seemed so eager to get to her. But he understood now who had attacked Rockford and suspected the reason. Albert Wesker should have died when the Spencer mansion was burned, but it seemed he sold his soul to someone at the price of his life. Someone who obviously as nasty and immoral as Umbrella. Someone who was perfectly willing to kill for whatever it was they wanted, for something an Umbrella had. Chris didn't care. At the moment, all he cared about was Claire, getting himself to this Antarctica facility. He knew that Umbrella had a legitimate base there. It had to be the same one, and if it wasn't, somebody there would know where the experiments were taking place. He had one grenade left, and if he could find the underground airport, he'd have no trouble getting inside, and he could fly anything with wings. He'd radio on the way for a read on the Umbrella base, and if he couldn't find a weapon to get her out, he'd use his bare hands. All that mattered was Claire, and he was on his way. Alright, I knew it was gonna get crazy when Wesker showed up, but like, whoa. Stephanie, what is going on? That never happened in the game, Stephanie. No wonder she needed to put that little excerpt right at the beginning of the book where she's like, faithful readers of the series have probably already read this note, but please allow me to repeat myself. You may notice time and or character discrepancies between the books and the games, or the books and the books for that matter. With the games, comics, and novelizations being written, revised, and produced at different times and by different people, complete consistency is nearly impossible. I can only apologize on behalf of us all, and hope that in spite of chronological errors, you will continue to enjoy the mix of corporate zombies and hapless heroes that makes Resident Evil so much fun to write, and if I'm lucky, to read. Like, nah, girl, you just put that in there because he was so down bad you had to, like, make sure people understood what they were getting into or something. There's no way, like, what? Bro said... I don't even want to repeat it, like, that was crazy. Like, a hard on like you wouldn't believe, like, what? That just that just completely changed that entire interaction between Chris and Wesker now. Oh god, now I'm gonna be thinking about that every single time I play Veronica. At least until I forget like I did last time. I can't believe I read this book when I was like young. Like I don't even think I got that part. I was like, what does that mean? Or something like that's crazy. What? Like, no way. What? Jesus. Alright. 14. They were mere hours away. Two men contacted by history, one her enemy, the other... Alexia didn't know about the other, not yet, but knew that he meant to reclaim the girl she'd taken from the snow machine. Probably the boy as well. None of them would be leaving, of course, but she was looking forward to the petty intrigues and overblown self-important dramas that their humanity would bring to her home. She would enjoy the chance to observe their natural tendencies and instincts before forever altering their lives. She stood in the great hall considering things, possible futures, her next transformation, the structural and psychological changes her new synthesis would create in humans, and how she should welcome her new guests. And it occurred to her that her home, deep beneath the ice and snow, might be difficult for them to achieve. She immediately wished for the doors to be opened, and for obstacles to be removed, and she heard and saw and felt the result in the same instant, existing in 100 places at once, as the locks were broken and walls were taken down, as debris was pushed aside and apertures were widened. She was prepared. Things would move quickly now, and what happened in the next hours would, to a degree, define her choices for some time to come. It was all still so new, the templates of her new life written only in sand. Smiling at her own poetic notions, Alexia went to see about the first series of injections for the boy. I'm still just blown away at that. Stephanie, girl, explain yourself. Like, if my channel ever gets big enough, I'm gonna try and like get like an interview with Stephanie, and I'm dead ass gonna ask her like, were you down bad writing the Code Veronica book? And she's gonna be like blown away, like almost offended that I would like interview her and ask her such a question, and she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm gonna be like, I seen the things you said in this book, girl. Like, I don't know why you're playing innocent. And she's probably gonna get mad and then like hang up the call or something, and that's gonna be like the whole interview with her. But it's gonna be worth it. So Stephanie, if you happen to stroll upon this video at your time on the internet, you should contact me. I need to ask about this. I need to know what was going through. Oh, I know what was going through your head while you were thinking about it. So I guess I don't want to know that, but I want to know why. All right. Chapter 15. I think you're 3,000 subs away from getting that interview. 3,000, huh? Okay. Bet. What am I at right now? 75.50. Okay. So like about 10K. Gotcha. All right. If that's what it takes, I'll totally try it. I'll get 10,000 subs and I'll try contacting Stephanie Down Bad Perry. That'll be a video to watch. Something was very, very wrong at Umbrella's Antarctic facility, but Chris didn't know what it was. On the 5th basement level of the dark and deserted compound, hundreds of feet beneath the snow, Chris stood in front of what appeared to be a full-blown mansion made of white brick. There's a fountain behind him, potted plants, even a decorative merry-go-round. He'd been led there, presumably because someone wanted him to go inside, but he didn't know who or why. His instincts were telling him to get the hell out, but he ignored them. He had to, not knowing if he was a lamb being led to slaughter or if he was being taken to Claire. Since landing in the jet in the roof hangar, he'd been guided every step of the way, walking into halls and having doors locked behind him, others opening up in front of him. Twice he'd found jewels on the cold cement floors pointing him in a particular direction, and once, after taking a wrong turn, all the lights had gone out. They'd come back on when he groped his way back. What? Back to where okay. He'd gone wrong. It had just been strange enough just getting the facility, passing over endless miles of gray ice and snow, and then seeing it for the first time, rising up from the blank plains like an illusion. But to be herded someplace like an animal, shuffled along without knowing the reason. Chris was scared, more scared than he wanted to admit. He tried to stop, and look around for weapons or clues, but everything had been shut off, every door he tried locked, except for the ones he was supposed to go through, of course. The cameras that had been watching him every move were so well hidden that he hadn't seen even one of them. But it almost seemed that his shepherd knew his mind, knew what signals to give him, knew how to keep him going. He initially thought that it was Wesker, and it was all some setup to trap him, but why bother? He could have strangled Chris at the island if he wanted to. No, he was being guided for some other reason, and it seemed he had no choice but to follow along. Not if he wanted to find Claire. He took a deep breath and opened the front door of the mansion, stepping inside. It was beautiful, as extravagant as the front of the building had suggested. Grand staircase, arched pillars, and strangely familiar, though it took him a moment to see how, the colors and decorations different. It was the layout, same basic layout as the front hall of the Spencer mansion. It was surreal, but so perfectly harmonious with all the other weirdness that he didn't bat an eye. Chris stood for a moment waiting, looking around for another signal, and then he heard what sounded like a laugh coming from behind the stairs. It was the same laugh that he heard at the Rockford facility. That woman. What had she said? Something about wanting to play? It definitely felt like a game, like he was a character being moved around for someone else's enjoyment, and it was starting to piss him off. That he was afraid only made him angrier. Chris stalked toward the back wall, ready to confront this woman, to demand some answers. But when he stepped around one of the decorative pillars, he saw that there was no one there. What the hell is this thing? He muttered, turning. And there was Claire, webbed to the back of the stairs as if by some giant Charlotte, her eyes closed, her head hanging limply. Wesker wasn't surprised to find that parts of the Antarctic compound had been built to look like parts of the Spencer estate. The underground extravagance was an incredible waste, but he noted as many times before, so like Umbrella. It was all about intrigue for them, back at the beginning, before it all turned into a bad spy movie. Oswald Spencer and Edward Ashford had been responsible for the creation of the T-virus, but it had been their only real accomplishment. The rest was money thrown away. Truly, the entire facility, except for the laboratories, of course, was an expensive joke, set up by old men and children with little imagination and too much money. Aware that Alexia was probably watching, Wesker took his time, moving from level to level, clearing away a few wandering zombies as he walked. He wasn't carrying a weapon, and had simply snapped their necks and left them to asphyxiate. Twice he was spotted by other creatures, things he'd sensed and not seen, but they hadn't attacked, perhaps recognized him as one of their own. Wesker kept moving, sure that Alexia would find him when she was ready. He landed his jet some distance from the compound, wanting to be sure that she understood how different he was. That elements didn't affect him, that he was physically stronger than any 5 men put together, with better endurance and sharper senses. He also wanted her to see that he was respectful of her space, and he was willing to be patient, and that he was extremely determined. Whatever you want, my sweet, he thought, walking through a cold room corridor on the 5th basement floor. He'd been through the area already, but knew that the mansion was there, and suspected that she would want to greet him in high style. It didn't matter to him. She could drop in on him in a toilet stall for all he cared. But he thought she was probably as vain and spoiled as her brother. However powerful and brilliant she was also a 25-year-old rich girl who had spent 15 of those sleeping. Rich, beautiful, playful, she probably didn't even understand her powers yet, but it still wouldn't be long now. He could feel it. He left the icy stillness of the cold corridor and started for the mansion once again. Stephanie, girl! Claire woke slowly, arching her body gently supported by warm hands that lifted and held her. She was laid down on the cold floor, bringing her around, and as she opened her eyes, she saw her brother smiling at her. Chris! She sat up and embraced him, ignoring her sore muscles, so happy to see him for that moment. She forgot everything else. It was Chris. It was him, finally. Hey, sis, he said, fiercely hugging her back, the familiar sound of his voice making her warm and safe. She wished it could last forever, after so long. Claire. Oh, man. I think we ought to get out of here now, he said. She could hear a thread of concern behind his words that woke her up. That reminded her of all that had happened. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I don't think it's safe. We have to find Steve, she said, and started to get to her feet, worried. Chris helped her, supporting her while she steadied herself. Who's Steve? A friend, Claire said. We got away from Rockford together, but we were about to get away from here too, but some kind of creature grabbed our snowmobile and threw it? She looked at Chris, suddenly more than just worried. Before I blacked out, I heard him say my name. He's alive, Chris. We can't leave him. We won't, Chris said firmly. And Claire felt weak with relief. Chris had come. He knew all about Umbrella. He'd be able to find Steve and take them away. Laughter. A woman was laughing. A high, cruel laugh. Chris stepped out from behind the stairs, Claire following, both of them looking up to the balcony. And there was the woman. It was Alfred? No, not Alfred. And that meant... There really is an Alexia, Claire said softly. Go goddamn figure. Still laughing, Alexia Ashford turned and walked away, exiting through a door at the top of the stairs. She might know where Steve is, Chris said urgently. Even as it occurred to Claire, and then both of them were running, climbing. Claire quickly outpacing him, ready to slap the trash out of Alfred's creepy sister. And crash! Behind her, the stairs falling away, Claire rolling the floor as a huge tentacle smashed through the balcony, like the one in the snowcat. And then it was gone, retreating through the hole it had created, leaving a trash set of side stairs behind. The main staircase was still whole, but Claire was stuck on the second floor on a shattered wood island. She'd have to climb down. Claire! She sprawled to her feet and saw Chris down below, wincing at some pain in his leg amid the broken wood and plaster. Are you okay? Claire asked, and Chris nodded. And then there was a scream, and she felt her blood run cold. It came from beyond the door that Alexia had gone through, and it was Steve. There was no question in Claire's mind. It was Steve, and he was in pain. Can't leave Chris, but... Chris, it's him, Claire said, looking between her brother and the door, not sure what to do. Go, I'll catch up, Chris called. But, go, I'll be fine, just be careful. Terrified, Claire turned and ran, hoping she wasn't too late. Ooh, things are heating up. I guess Wesker is really horny in this book, but whatever. Wesker stepped onto the grand foyer of the underground mansion, saw it wasn't quite so grand anymore. Something had happened to the stairs, part of the upper balcony now smashed to the floor. He heard someone moving behind a huge, jagged piece of balcony still hanging from the tattered carpet. It took a step toward it, and there she was, standing at the top of the stairs in a long, dark dress, silky blonde hair tied back from her pale, beautiful face. Alexia Ashford, Wesker said, surprised to find himself somewhat in awe now that the moment was at hand. She looked human, delicate and helpless, but he knew better. Make your pitch and make it good. Wesker cleared his throat, stepping forward and taking off his sunglasses. Alexia, my name is... I can't even do the Albert voice. I just can't believe the tenacity of this man. Alexia, my name is Albert Wesker. I represent a group who has long admired your work and been eagerly awaiting your, return. She watched him impassively, head tilted slightly. Her back straight and stiff. She looked like a debutante at her first society party. And may I add that it's a personal honor to meet you, Wesker said sincerely. My employers told me all about you. I know your father sighed with you the genes of his own great-grandmother, Veronica, and that with the genetic material, the very foundation of the Ashford line, he created you and Alfred to be the culmination of genius. Veronica would surely be proud. I know you created T. Veronica in her honor. Oh, wait, he's still saying that. I know you created T. Veronica in her honor. Careful. You probably shouldn't mention what had happened to her father. Don't bitch this up. Oh, wait. What did he? Okay, he only said half of that. All right, I'm sorry. There's like they cut off the quotation marks, so it doesn't like clearly say where he stops talking and where he's like thinking to complete the sentence. Yeah, he probably shouldn't mention what had happened to her father. Don't bitch this up. And that you are the only being alive with access to the virus. I am the virus, Alexia said coolly, studying him through narrowed eyes. Yes, of course, Wesker said. God, he hated this diplomatic shit. He was terrible at it. But he wanted to impress her, to impress upon her how valuable she was to certain interested parties. So, he continued, thinking how much easier things would have been if he got into her in stasis. I would like it very much. We would all appreciate it if you would agree to accompany me to a private meeting with my employers to discuss an alliance of sorts. I can assure you, you won't be disappointed. She waited to see if he was finished, and then laughed, long and loud. Wesker felt himself flush. It was clear from her tone exactly what she thought of his request. Fine. Nice time is over. Wesker stepped forward and held out his hand. We want a sample of T. Veronica, he said, the gloss disappearing from his voice. And I'm going to have to insist that you give it to me. As she started down the stairs, just for a second, he thought she was going to do it. But then she started to change, and he stopped thinking anything. He could only stare, his awe returning tenfold. A step down, her dress burned away in searing veins of golden light, the light coming from her body. Another step, her flesh changed, turned a deep gray, her hair disappearing, gray flesh locks growing from the top of her head and flopping down to frame her face. Her nakedness was transformed with her next step, as rough pebbled armor grew over one leg and her groin, curled up to support a rounded breast, to cover her right arm. By the time she reached the bottom of the stairs, she no longer resembled Alexia Ashford. His breath taken away, Wesker reached for her, and with the back of her hand she struck him, and he was flying, landing in a heap by the front door. Such power! He stood up, understanding that force might be useful, and he prepared himself to move, to use his own power. And with a smile, she waved her hand, and fire burst up from the marble floor, lines of it surrounding him, beckoned to life by her slender fingers. She lowered her hand, and the flames went down, but didn't die, still burning from stone, from bare stone. Wesker knew then it was over. If she chose to spare him, he'd be lucky. Without another word, he turned and walked out, running as soon as the door had closed behind him. The part creature left. Only seconds later, the young man followed, believing that he escaped unseen. Alexia watched them run, amused but slightly disappointed. She'd expected more. The park creature was no threat. She decided to spare him. His arrogance had pleased her, if not his pathetic offer. The young man, though, brave and self-sacrificing, loyal, compassionate, physically a good specimen, and he loved his sister, who was about to die. It would make for an interesting psychological reaction. Alexia decided that she would create a confrontation for them to interact. She would test a new form of herself to see if his grief made him bolder, or if it proved to be a liability. She laughed, suddenly imagining a suitable and apt form to take. Except for Alfred, no one had known the simple secret of T. Veronica, that it was based on the chemistry of a queen ant. She would try an insectile configuration, and experience the strengths and advantages that such a form would propose. Her disappointment was past. The girl and her boy would die, and then she would indulge herself with a young man. Indulge herself? What? Girl. It's like, it just gets worse, like, every chapter. Like, you got Wesker down bad, you got Alexia down bad, you got Steve down bad. Like, the only one not down. I mean, even Claire was saying she was open for suggestions to give Steve a reward. Like, everyone's down bad in this book. Stephanie, explain yourself. What? We need answers. It's right, Ravel. What? Steph is telling on herself. Chris is the only one who's not down bad. Chris is the only one focused on the mission. Like, this is why Chris is the GOAT. What? Stay focused. Chris is the GOAT. Doesn't matter how down bad the author is. She's gotta write Chris legit. People would riot. Watch, like, the next chapter, it's like, Chris sees Alexia and gets hard on. Her son is just gonna be like, she's gonna make him down bad and I'm gonna eat my words. Ugh. Absolutely ridiculous. I'm literally sweating. This is so ridiculous. Where's my towel? Alright. I can wipe my hands off. Alright, Steph. If that's even your real name, Steph. Alright. Chapter 16. Through the rooms and halls of a mansion, Claire had to run, afraid to hear him scream again, afraid not to because she didn't know where to look. Past the plushly decorated halls, she found herself in a prison area. Cells on either wall, the environment cold and dark once more. A lone virus carrier reached for her from behind the bars, wailing. Steve! Her voice echoed back at her, full of tension and fear, but Steve didn't answer. There was a thick metal door to her right, different than the others, reinforced by bands of steel. She opened it, stepping into a small bare room, and opened into a much larger room. Steve! No answer, but the bigger room was longly and dimly lit, a kind of huge hall. She couldn't see what was at the other end. She saw there was a suspended gate between the small room and the hall, which definitely gave her pause. She looked around and found a piece of broken wood on the floor, and then wedged it between the outer door and its frame, not wanting to end up locked inside. She hurried into the giant hall, intimidating, oversized statues of knights lining the heavily shadowed walls, her anxiety growing with every passing second. Where was he? Why had he screamed? She was halfway down the hall when she saw him, slumped in a chair at the far end, some kind of restraining bar across his chest. Oh God. Claire ran, and as she got closer, she could see that the bar was a huge axe, a halberd, the blade firmly entrenched in the wall next to him. He seemed very small and very young, his eyes closed and head down, but she could see that he was breathing, and felt less anxious. She reached aside and pulled at the giant axe, but it wouldn't budge. She crouched next to him, touching his arm, and he stirred and opened his eyes. Claire! Steve, thank God you're alright. What happened? How'd you get here? Steve pushed at the long axe handle, but couldn't move it either. Alexia, it had to be Alexia. She looked just like Alfred. She injected me with something. She said she was going to do what she'd done to her father, but she was going to get it right this time. He shoved at an axe again, straining, but it wasn't moving. In other words, she was pretty whacked. I guess she and Alfred are pretty close after all. Steve trailed off, his cheeks suddenly flushing with color. His hands started to twitch, his body trembling. What is it? Claire asked, afraid. So afraid because his body was hunching over, his fingers clenching his fist, his eyes wild and terrified. Claire! His voice dropped an octave, her name becoming a growl, and he was writhing in the chair, his clothes ripping. He opened his mouth and a liquid moan came out, frightened at first, but then angry, furious. "No," Claire whispered and started to back away, and Steve grabbed the halberd, wrenching it out of the wall, standing up. His body continued to hunch over, his head dropping down, muscles ripping beneath his skin that was turning a gray-green. Spikes rose up from his left shoulder, 2, 3 of them. His hands elongated, and as giant bloodless wound grew across his back, his eyes turned red and animal. The thing that had been Steve Burnside opened its mouth and screamed, enraged, and Claire turned and sprinted away, sick with loss and fright, running for all she was worth. The monster came after her, swinging the massive axe, the sharp edge whistling through the air. She could feel the wind from the swinging blade, and somehow found more speed, her legs pumping, pushing her faster. The monster swung again, hit something, the sound vast and deafening. Faster, faster. The small room just ahead, and the gate was coming down, about to lock. I was trying to finish that sentence before I sneezed. I was trying so hard. Alright. Where was I? The monster came after her, swinging the massive axe, the sharp edge whistling through the air. She could feel the wind from the swinging blade, and somehow found more oh, I already read that. The gate was coming down, about to lock her into the hall with the monster. How didn't matter. She had to go faster still, or she was dead. In one final brutal push, Claire dove for the shrinking space between the bottom of the gate and the floor, sliding in on her stomach, the gate crashing closed behind her. The monster roared, began swinging the axe with abandon, sparks flying as it attacked the metal bars. In shock, Claire watched it break through 3 of them, bending the steel by the very ferocity of its blows before she realized she could get out. Door! I propped the door open, she thought dazedly, and stood up, a single step toward her escape. And then something broke through the wall with a crash. Not the monster, a thing that wrapped around her like a constrictor, lifting her. Another of the tentacles? The monster continued to hack at the metal. It would break through in seconds, and the tentacle had her tightly in its rubbery grasp. Awakened from her daze, Claire beat at her captor, pried at it, but the matter was impervious. It simply held her, waiting for the monster to breach the gate. It wanted to beat her and cut her. It wanted to rip her apart, so it slammed the weapon into the bars over and over, and finally there was a hole it could pass through. She was making noises in the grip of that thing that held her, gasping noises that made his blood hot and excited. It made it raise the axe, lusting for the end of her. It brought the axe down hard, remembering what he told her, what he promised her. "You can get the next one, and I will." And he stopped, the blade almost touching her skull. The tentacle waited, gripped her tighter, and he remembered. Claire. Steve lifted the axe again, strong. He was so strong, and slammed it down onto the tentacle, slicing through. In a spray of green fluid, the thick coil snapped and hit him in the chest, throwing him into the wall before retreating. He felt and heard his ribs break. He felt the boil of his blood cooling, felt his strength going away. The pain came, sharp and dull and everywhere, but he opened his eyes and she was there. She was safe. She was reaching for his hand. Claire Redfield, reaching for his hand with tears in her eyes. The monster was gone. She reached out to hold his hand and lifted it to his face, his beautiful dying face, laying it across his cheek. "You're warm," he whispered. "Hang on," she said, pleading, the knot in her throat choking her. "Please, my brother came and he'll take us with him. Please don't die." Steve's eyes were fluttering, as though he were trying very hard to stay awake. "I'm glad your brother came," he whispered, his voice fading. "And I'm glad I met you. I love you." On the last word, his head fell forward, his chest falling and not rising again. And then Claire was alone. Steve was gone. Ooh, end of the chapter. That was kind of crazy. Ayo. Crazy. Oh man. Rest in peace, our boy Steve. Rest in peace, Steve. Dang. But that being said, we are actually almost done with this book, so... Yeah. So yeah, we'll definitely finish this tonight. Alright. Chapter 17. Chris ran, knowing that their time was short. As long as Alexia Ashford is alive, afraid that she might have already gotten Claire. Claire! He shouted, banging his fist on every door he passed. It didn't matter, his shouting. If Alexia was even half as powerful as he suspected, she already knew where he was, and where Claire was. Please, please don't hurt her, he thought, the thought repeating itself as he ran down another hall, through a door, another hall, and another. He didn't know if anything could stop Alexia, but he could find Claire and get them into the evac elevator. He meant to try and trigger the self-destruct system before leaving. Alexia was halfway to omnipotence and purely evil. She was an apocalypse waiting to happen, and she had to be stopped. Claire. Through a familiar hallway, another Spencer Estate copy. Through a door that opened in some kind of shadowy prison, holding cells lining the walls. He had to find her, and if he couldn't leave. He wanted Alexia dead, but he wouldn't endanger Claire's life, not for anything, and getting her out took absolute priority. And somebody was crying behind one of the closed doors. Chris stopped running and listened, trying not to breathe, and tuning out the restless banging of a virus carrier locked in another cell. Another gasping wail. Claire, oh thank God you're alive. He ripped open the door, ready to hurt anything, even close to her, and saw her sitting on the floor sobbing, her arms wrapped around a young man, his naked body bruised and pitiful. He was dead. Ah, shit. It could only be Steve, Claire's friend, and though he was sorry for the boy he'd never met, Chris's heart was breaking for her. She looked so fragile, so alone. Something else to lay at Alexia's doorstep. Chris had no doubt that Steve had died because of that crazy bitch. But as much as he wanted to sit down and comfort Claire, to hold her hand and let her grieve, he knew they had to get out. We have to go now, Claire, he said as gently as possible, and was relieved when she nodded, carefully laying her friend down, closing his eyes with one trembling hand. She kissed him on the forehead and then stood up. Okay, she said, nodding again. I'm ready. She didn't look back, and in spite of everything, he was proud of her. She was strong, stronger than he would have been if he had been asked to leave someone he cared about. Together they ran back into the hall, Chris figuring that they had to be close to the southwest corner of the building where he'd landed the jet and seen the emergency evacuation elevator. The self-destruct system was presumably close enough to the elevator to make a fast possible escape. If they could just get to that elevator, he'd check every floor on the way up. There were stairs at the south end of the hall, and Chris ran for them, Claire at his side. He could feel the seconds ticking past as they hurried up the steps. It felt like time was closing in on them, and that Alexia was finished playing. Through the door at the top of the stairs, running out into a giant metal grid platform, Chris laughed out loud when he looked behind them and saw the nondescript doors of the emergency elevator. What? Claire asked. He motioned at the doors, grinning. That'll take us straight to the jet. Claire nodded, not smiling, but looked relieved. Good, let's go. Chris had turned back to look at the wall across from the lift. I gotta check something first, he said, wanting to take a closer look at the corner door. It looked like a security door. You go, I'll be right there. Forget it, Claire said firmly. She walked after him, her eyes red from crying, but her chin set and determined. No way we're splitting up again. Chris leaned down to look at the door's locking mechanism inside, standing back up. They were probably at a self-destruct system already. The lock was complicated and unique, requiring a key he didn't have. Besides which, to the right of the door was a lockdown grenade launcher of some kind. One he didn't recognize, the bar holding it down labeled emergency release only. Just as well, we should get out while we still can, he thought, but wasn't happy about it. How much more powerful would Alexia become before another chance like this one? Hey, wait a sec, Claire said and began rummaging through a small pack around her waist. Before he could ask, she was holding up a slender metal key shaped like a dragonfly. There was no question that it would fit the lock. I found it back at Rockford, she said, bending over and pressing it in the indentation. It fit perfectly, the lock releasing with a solid metallic clink. You're going to set off the self-destruct, aren't you? Claire said, not really a question. Do you have the code? Chris didn't really answer, thinking that there was an amazing number of coincidences in life, and sometimes they worked to one's advantage. Code Veronica, he said softly and pulled the door open, ready to take it all down, understanding that it was meant to be. Bro really hit it with the like, really did the self plug of just like Code Veronica. Oh man, Steph won't stop, will she? Steph is insatiable. Oh my god, I can't believe that. Like, do you have the code? Code Veronica. Explosions in the background. Yeah, rock music playing. Like, come on. That was the cheesiest fucking, like, 80s action movie thing I've ever read in my life. Do you have the code? Code Veronica. Like, what, bro? Come on, Chris. Come on, Chris. Alright. Anyway. The boy was dead, but the girl wasn't, and now the young man was trying to destroy Alexia's home. It wasn't a game or an experiment or something to observe. He had to die, in pain and misery. How had he dared to consider such a thing? He should be on his knees in front of her, a worthless supplicant for her to do with as she wished. How dare he? Alexia saw the siblings walking away from their treacherous deed, felt them wishing to leave as the automated sequence began, lights and sounds flashing, systems shutting down throughout the terminal. Their pertifee was useless, of course. She would be able to stop the destruct sequence with a minimum effort, using her control over organic to sever every connection in the facility, but it was the thought behind the act that so infuriated her. He had witnessed the glory of her capabilities. He had seen it and fled in terror, and yet he could fancy himself worthy to take a life such as hers? Alexia gathered herself, drawing all her power in, becoming complete. She knew that the young man had picked up a weapon that had been sitting next to the keyboard, a revolver that someone had left behind. She didn't object, knowing that the firearm would give him hope, and that for a victory to be complete, the victor had to take everything. She would take his hope, she would take his sister's life, and then she would take his. When she was whole, she imagined herself becoming liquid, traveling through the structure of her surroundings as easily as the organic extension she controlled, and then she was doing so, moving to contort the interlopers. They were startled, as if they'd expected to succeed. She slid out from inside her organic carrier, unfolding herself, turning a look into their dull eyes, their wincing sheep's faces. She watched them watch her, curious in spite of her anger. They argued in front of her, he insisting that he would handle things and the girl should flee. The girl accepted, but reluctantly, insisting in turn that he should survive. Following that ludicrous statement, the girl turned and ran for the elevator. Alexia moved to intercept, raising her hand to smite the girl, and a perforation opened in her flesh, distracting her. A bullet had entered her body. She turned and smiled at him, at the gun in his hand, and reached into herself, pulling the bullet out and tossing it towards him. As gratifying as his expression was, the girl was gone by the time she turned back, and it was time to expand her boundaries, Alexia decided, to show him what she was, what she could do, and to put the fear of God into him. Because as she closed her eyes, imagining, wishing, she stopped being Alexia Ashford and became wrath, divine and merciless. Ooh, what a chapter. CSI Miami moment. Someone handing me my sunglasses. Chris and his RE1 aura with that line. Yeah. Code Veronica. I'm gonna clown him forever for that. Chapter 19. The self-destruct sequence has been activated. The recording intoned, reverberating through the room, crowding out the rest of its message. You have 4 minutes and 30 seconds to reach a minimum safe distance. Combined with the sirens and flashing emergency lights, Chris was on sensory overload before the fight even began. Alexia raised her hand to hit Claire, and Chris fired the .357 bucking in his hand, the shot blasting over the self-destruct alarms, deafeningly explosive. Yes, a clean hit, right through the gut, and Claire was already at the elevator pushing the button, stepping inside. But instead of bleeding, instead of faltering even a step, Alexia smiled at him. She lifted one of her slender gray hands and pushed it into her body, the flesh melding seamlessly, flowing like water. A second later, she held up the round he'd nailed her with and gently tossed it in his direction. Bad, this is very, very bad, Chris thought numbly, and then she started to change.
The lithe gray female crouched on the metal grid, and her liquid flesh started to tremble, to form tiny peaks and dips all across her body, the tissue bubbling, expanding. The peaks became mountains, the dips valleys, and all of it gray and swelling as her limbs started to fold in on themselves. Her arms curved over and joined the growing mass, the legs disappearing into it, texture turning rough and sterid, veins like cables rising, and she kept swelling. Her head rolled down and became part of the giant rounded body of her gray becoming muscle tissue red, the purple and blue blood of vessels networking across like a tide. "You have 4 minutes to reach minimum safe distance," someone said, but Chris barely heard her. He was backing away and becoming more and more convinced that this was not going to end well. The elevator was blocked, and she just kept getting bigger. Thick tentacles pushed out from beneath the elephantine mass, undulating like waves, spreading out across the platform. Chris's back hit a wall, stopping him, and the massive tumorous thing, suddenly rose up, as if unbending from some non-existent waste, spreading giant wings, a dragonfly's wings, raising a contorted and deformed half-human face. The face opened its mouth and a gigantic roaring shriek spilled out, the wings trembling from the raw power of the sound. And then it spit at him, a thin stream of yellow and green bile that splashed on the platform at his feet and began to eat through the metal. "Shit!" Chris shouted and barely jumped out of the way as one of the tentacles slashed forward. He had to watch the mouth and tentacles at the same time. And from the rounded, quivering pink spheres that had grown up around the base of the giant body, moving things began to crawl out. Chris ran to the furthest corner from the Alexia thing and raced the 357, not sure where to shoot. The small sub-creatures were landing on the platform, some like flat, rounded rocks with tentacles, some like beetles, some like nothing you'd ever seen before. They were all coming toward him, moving fast. The eyes, if you can't kill it, maybe you can blind it. But the eyes were already blind, round gray holes with darkness underneath. He'd already seen how effective bullets were against her flesh. That decided it for him. Chris took aim and fired, and the pulsating, bloated creature was screaming again, this time in pain, one of her wings fluttering down to the platform. A few of the small organisms had reached him, one of the beetle creatures leaping onto his leg, trying to climb up. Disgusted, he brushed it off, but there was another to take its place, and a third. A tentacle flew at his face, shot from one of the rounded stone shapes. Chris blocked it, but barely. "Move! You have 3 minutes and 30 seconds to reach minimum safe distance." Chris ran along the back wall, reached the outer corner in front of the creature, and targeted again, trying for another wing. The shot went high, but the next one hit. It howled, the broken wing hanging from the shredded connecting tissue, and then it spit again, a stream of bile missing his face by inches. The thing now had only its two uppermost wings, and though he knew he'd hurt it, it didn't seem to have suffered anything close to a serious injury. "And I have 2 rounds left." There had to be something he could do, some way to stop it. The self-destruct was going to blow them all to hell, and it would all be his fault. He leaped away as another tentacle whipped out from the creature's base, trying to think. This was a goddamn emergency, he had to think. Emergency release only. The bloated monster shrieked. More of the beetles were jumping at him, but he ignored them, having only to turn his head to see the inset weapon next to the door. The one with the lockdown bar. A grenade or rocket launcher, whatever it was. It was beautiful. But the bar was still down, it hadn't released. "You have 2 minutes to reach minimum safe distance." Ka-chunk, the bar flipped up. Chris snatched it out, lifting and aiming it at the creature's swollen guts. He didn't know what it would do, but he hoped it was good. He hoped it would shut that bitch down. There was no safety, nothing to chamber. Chris pulled the trigger, and a fury of white light and heat leaped from the barrel, blowing into the fat belly like an arrow to a balloon. The effect was huge, the explosion monstrous. A fountain of blood and gray jelly splattered out from the gaping ragged hole, black splattering onto his face, but he only had eyes for the screaming Alexia beast that its flesh and bone form gave out, deflating. The upper body of the creature was trying to pull free from the dying mass, the 2 wings flailing frantically in the air. But with only 2, it couldn't free itself, and so it was dying. He knew because he could see its blood draining away, because the color of its horrid flesh was changing, turning ashy, the sub-creature shriveling because of the absolute, complete hatred in its face, and the absolute surprise. As the Alexia monster fell silent and began to sag, her features dripping, Chris heard that he had 1 minute left. "Claire!" He dropped the incendiary launcher and ran. Ooh. Chapter 20.
Claire felt like shit, and there was nothing she could do about it. Steve was dead, and Chris would either come or he wouldn't. Whatever happened, everything was going to blow up pretty soon, and she had no say in any of it. You have 2 minutes to reach minimum safe distance, the computer politely informed her, and Claire extended her middle finger toward the closest speaker. If there was a hell, she knew what they played in the elevators instead of music. There's only one jet where the elevator had let her out, and then Claire had sat on the railing in front of it, her arms tightly crossed, her stare fixed on the elevator doors. She watched and waited, her anxiety building, a part of her believing completely that he wasn't coming as the alarms blared through the empty hangar, echoing back at her. Don't leave me, Chris, she thought, clutching herself tighter. She thought of Steve, remembering the laugh attack he inspired back on the island, how he'd looked at her like she was crazy. Come now, Chris, she thought, closing her eyes and wishing it as hard as she could. She couldn't lose him, too. Her heart wouldn't be able to stand it. There was 1 minute to reach minimum safe distance when the building started to rumble beneath her feet. She thought she might cry, but there were no tears. She went back to watching the elevator door instead, certain now that he was gone. So sure that when the door opened, and when he stepped out, she thought she might be hallucinating. Chris? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. And he was running toward her, splashes of blood and something else smeared across his face and arms. But that was when she understood that he was real. She wouldn't have hallucinated him with goop on his face. Chris! Get in, he commanded, and Claire jumped into the second seat, happy, scared, and anxious, lonely and relieved, wishing that Steve was with them, and sad that he wasn't. There were more feelings, seeming dozens, but at the moment she couldn't handle any of them. She pushed them aside and didn't think at all, didn't feel anything but hope. Chris tucked them in tight and started pushing buttons, the small jet roaring to life. Above them, the ceiling slid apart, the storm clouds breaking up overhead as he lifted them out of the hangar, smooth and easy. A few seconds later, they were blasting away, leaving the dying facility behind. Chris's shoulders relaxed, and he wiped his hand across his forehead, trying to rub off the sour-smelling gunk. I could use a shower, he said lightly, and the tears finally welled up, spilling over her lower lashes. Chris, I thought I'd lost you too. Don't leave me alone again, okay? She asked, doing what she could to keep the tears out of her voice. Chris hesitated, and he instantly knew why. Knew that it wasn't over for either of them. This was too much to ask. Umbrella, she said, and Chris was nodding. We have to settle this once and for all, he said tightly. We have to, Claire. Claire didn't know what to say, finally opting not to say anything. When the explosion came a moment later, she didn't look. She closed her eyes instead, leaning back into her seat and hoped when she finally slept, she wouldn't dream. Now we're on the epilogue. Miles away, Wesker heard the explosion and could see the smoke rising shortly afterwards, thick black plumes of it. He thought about circling the jet back, but decided against it. There was no point. If Alexia wasn't dead, his people would find out soon enough. Hell, the world would find out soon enough. I hope you were in there, Redfield, he said softly, smiling a little. Of course he was. Chris wasn't bright enough or fast enough to have gotten out in time. Although, he might be lucky enough. Wesker had to concede that much. Redfield had the luck of the devil. It was a shame about Alexia turning him down. She did something, terrifying and evil, but definitely something. His employers weren't going to be happy when he came back without her, and he couldn't blame them. They shelled out plenty for the Rockford attack, and he practically promised them results. They'll live. If they don't like it, they can find themselves a new boy. Trent, on the other hand. Wesker grimaced, not looking forward to the next meeting. He owed the man. After the Spencer fiasco, Trent had quite literally pulled his ass out of the fire, and arranged for him to be fixed up, better than new. He'd been responsible for Wesker's introduction to his current employers, men with real aspirations for power, and the means to obtain it. And he'd never admit it out loud, but Trent scared him. He was so smooth, well-mannered, and soft-spoken, with a glitter in his eyes that made him always seem to be laughing, like everything was a joke and he was the only one who got it. In Wesker's experience, the ones who laughed were the most dangerous. They didn't feel like they had anything to prove, and were usually at least slightly insane. I'm just glad we're on the same side, Wesker assured himself, believing it to be because he wanted to. Because he was going up against someone like Trent was a bad, bad plan. He could worry about Trent later, after he'd made a proper apologies to the proper agents. At least Boy Scout Redfield was dead. And he was still alive and kicking, working for the side that was going to win when all was said and done. Wesker smiled, looking forward to the end. It was going to be spectacular.
Its sun had come out and reflecting against the snow, creating a brilliant radiance, blinding in its perfection. A small plane shot away, its shadow chasing it across the sparkling plains. Yay! That's it! We're done. Yay! That was Code Veronica by Stephanie Downbad Perry. Yay! What'd you guys think? I'm very curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Thank you for the hearts, by the way. I really appreciate that. So, yeah, that was the book. I'll put it right next to the picture of it. Or, I guess it's this way. Yeah. Two books side by side. Here you go. Yeah, no, that was great, though. Like, now you guys see why I wanted to read this one next. Code Veronica being my favorite Resident Evil by a large margin. It makes me really happy to go over the story again, especially right before the remake comes out. It was quite the harrowing adventure. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Aw, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Jill. No, next we're gonna read 0 Hour, though. I can't wait for more Billy and more Rebecca with Billy Chronicles. The Jill shade. Yeah, because I went to go grab this book, and then I noticed this one was on the top, and I had to seize the opportunity to express my absolute love for Jill Valentine. You know, she does it all for Dick. I would be interested to see if the RE2 book was as good as everyone says it is, but yeah, like, I got 4 of the books now, like the physical copies. I guess this one. RE would be better overall with more Rebecca. I agree 100%. Rebecca is the GOAT. I need a Rebecca Chris team up game. Like RE10 and Chris and Rebecca. Let's do it. Let's do it, Capcom. I know you're cowards and you're afraid to do something that'll sell that well. You're scared of money. You're allergic to it. Otherwise, you wouldn't hesitate. Chris and Rebecca, let's go. Alright, anyway. Thank you guys for joining me on this journey. I don't know... She works in STEM and can handle a gun. What's not to love? Right. I don't know if I will jump straight into reading 0 Hour. But... because, like, I might play a game to break up, like, the constant reading. Because, let's be honest, the reading doesn't do so well on my channel. People aren't really too interested in reading a book, so I might have to mix it up with some more gaming content. So there's a good chance I'll probably play something next Wednesday instead of reading, but I'm not decided on it yet. So we'll see. It's still up in the works. You guys will find out next week. But yeah. Also, we're done with Resident Evil too. So next week is just gonna be a whole mystery. You guys are just gonna have to wait and see what I have in store for next week. So stay tuned. Make sure you're here Tuesday, Wednesday. I always say at 6 p.m., but with everything going on lately, I haven't made it any sooner than like 7:45. So I guess just be ready for some later streams while I try and get my sleep schedule back on track and, you know, kind of return to normalcy from having the medical issues and stuff. I'm trying to get back into the flow of things. So yeah, bear with me, guys. The streams might be a little bit later, like closer to like 7 or 8 next week, if I can't get my sleep schedule back on track. So yeah. We've only played as her when she's a rookie. We need to play as her and she's a vet. We're lucky to have you whatever time you come on. Thank you. I really appreciate that, you guys. Thank you. You guys are very understanding, and I'm really thankful for that. Thank you, guys. With that being said, I think we're about wrapped up for tonight. It's 11 p.m. That's the only thing that sucks about starting these streams so late, is that by the time I get into the after show, it's like time to go to bed, it feels like. So it's like, ugh. Anyway, yeah. I'm ready. Let me type my goodnight to you guys before I go. Thank you for joining me on this book journey. I really enjoy reading to you guys, and even though the content doesn't do very well on the channel, it is something that I want to continue in the future. I enjoy it way too much. It's just, I never wanted my channel to be just gaming anyway. It's like, I just wanted it to be centralized around Resident Evil and like horror franchises and stuff from like, you know, that started like say in the 90s. And yeah, so I think reading the books and stuff like that are some other mediums that can help explore the more diverse world of Resident Evil without just overloading on games. So yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Have a great week and an even better weekend, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you for this, and stay a triple threat. I will. Oh. I'll see you guys later, okay? Bye. Good night.